Chapter 191. I admit defeat. Feeling the danger at his neck, the man with a high nose, Dennis Corney, said with an ugly expression. He had 10 more years of combat experience than Gray, but he still lost. This made him feel like his face was burning. At the same time, he was full of doubts. How could his opponent have such rich combat experience? When he used the magic weapon at the end, why was the power released by his opponent so much stronger than his? Could it be that his magic weapon was of a higher grade? Gray looked at his opponent with a faint smile and put away his magic sword. It was natural that he had rich combat experience. After all, he was using blood fiends as practice targets. Fighting with blood fiends was a true battle of life and death. In such a battle, how could his combat experience not grow quickly? As for the fact that his magic weapon was stronger than his opponent's, it was even simpler. He was now a ferocious blood warrior. The power released from his magic weapon would naturally be at the ferocious blood warrior level. Naturally, it will be stronger than his opponent's. If his opponent did not release his magic weapon, Gray could still maintain the image of a high-ranking blood warrior and continue to fight with him for a while. Once he used his magic weapon, he would lose immediately. Trash. Looking at Dennis Corney, who admitted defeat with Gray's sword at his neck, Baron Macken's face was ashen. He had already cursed Dennis Corney countless times in his heart. Hearing his opponent's confidence, he agreed to the marriage with the Corney family, but he did not expect it to end in a crushing defeat. He had already made up his mind to dissolve the marriage when he returned. As for the reason, wasn't it enough that the Macken family lost an iron mine? Baron Macken, you let me win. In contrast to the ashen Baron Macken, Baron Iveline was full of smiles. Pride was almost written all over his face. In fact, right before the battle ended, he was still worried that Gray would lose. Who would have thought that this genius descendant of the Fergus family would give him such a pleasant surprise? He had actually defeated Dennis Corney, who was also a high-level blood warrior and should have had even more combat experience. Humph. Baron McIntosh snorted coldly and led the McIntosh family away. As for Dennis Corney, he didn't even bother to greet him. Since he had already decided to dissolve the marriage between the two families, it was inevitable that the relationship between the two families would turn sour. He didn't bother to hide it. Gray, thank you so much this time. Baron Iveline led his people to greet Gray with a smile. Uncle Derek, you're welcome, Greg said with a smile. For the victory, the Evelyn's family held a grand banquet. The main character of the banquet was self-evident. After staying in the Evelyn's family for one day, Gray's group bid farewell and left. Bernal wanted to stay for a few more days, but he also knew that Gray was not willing to stay here for long. After reaching the ferocious blood warrior level, there would be a commotion when cultivating blood arts. Gray hadn't been cultivating blood arts for the past few days. Delaying his cultivation for a few days because of him was already giving him a lot of face. After returning to Fergus Castle, Sarah and the others, who left on the second day after Gray's return, finally got to enjoy the belated gift from Gray, a cup of healthy blood fiend's blood every day. Bernal and Elise were both full of enjoyment. Being able to consume blood fiend's blood every day to aid their cultivation and feel their strength increasing rapidly, they couldn't be happier. On the other hand, Sarah and Caroline were full of resentment. Girls would always be disgusted by such things. For a few days, Gray could feel their resentful gazes. A few days later, right after Gray finished his cultivation and took a bath, a male servant walked towards him. Young Master Gray, what's the matter? Gray nodded and said indifferently, Lord Viscount wants you to go to the study. Oh. Gray nodded and walked towards Viscount Fergus's study. Dong, dong, dong. After knocking on the door, Gray pushed the door open and entered. Have a seat. Viscount Fergus was sitting in front of the tea table. When he saw Gray push open the door and enter, he waved his hand and gestured to Gray. He couldn't see through this son of his more and more. If you were to say that he was already a berserker, he wouldn't be too surprised. During this trip to the Red Leaf Forest, his son actually brought back a large amount of blood fiend's blood. Not only did he bring back blood fiend's blood, he even brought back 4 types of berserker blood fiend's blood. Thanks to him, he was now drinking blood fiend's blood every day. Although the blood of a murderous level blood fiend was useless to him, the blood of a berserker level blood fiend was still useful to him. Even if it wasn't the blood of a Gale Wolf, it was still the same. It was just that the effect wasn't as good as the blood of a Gale Wolf. He felt that his strength, which was originally stagnant, was faintly loosening. Perhaps becoming a berserker wasn't impossible. Gray asked as he walked over and sat down. "Father, is something the matter?" "Yes." Viscount Fergus nodded his head. "Ever since you took back the barbarian-level blood technique of the Wind Wolf Echelon and found out that the blood essence you'll need in the future is the blood essence of a Gale Wolf, I've been inquiring about the Gale Wolf's blood essence." At this point, a smile appeared on Viscount Fergus's face. "Just today, I received news that in half a month's time, there will be an auction in Tout City. The Gale Wolf's blood essence will be auctioned." "That's great." Hearing this news, Gray's face couldn't help but reveal a happy expression. Although it had only been a few months since he became a berserker, with his terrifying speed of improvement, he should be able to become a berserker in, at most, half a year's time. After becoming a berserker, he would have to implant a barbarian-level bloodline. Otherwise, his strength would stagnate. Based on his estimation, consuming the blood of a barbarian-level blood fiend would allow him to implant a barbarian-level blood fiend's bloodline and continue to improve his strength. But obviously, consuming the Gale Wolf's blood essence and implanting a Gale Wolf bloodline was the best choice. After all, with the corresponding blood technique, he wouldn't have to rely solely on the second metamorphosis to increase his strength even faster. "I hope that you will personally make a trip to bid for it," Viscount Fergus said solemnly. As a desolate level blood fiend, the Gale Wolf's final bid would probably be around 1,000,000 gold coins. Needless to say, it was extremely valuable. After thinking about it, he felt that it was best for Gray to personally go. "Yes, father." Naturally, Gray had no reason to disagree. Or rather, if Viscount Fergus had asked someone else to go, he might have suggested to Viscount Fox that he go himself. After all, this was related to the improvement of his strength in the future. He had to be careful. "All right, you've hunted quite a number of blood fiends this time. Have you figured out the limits of that magic weapon's ability?" This question had been lingering in his heart for a long time. Ever since he found out that Gray had brought back the blood of a berserker-level blood fiend, this question had been constantly lingering in his heart. In the end, he decided to ask. "I've already figured it out." Gray nodded. Although he didn't have a magic weapon, there was no need to hide the number of blood fiends from Viscount Fergus. "How is it?" Viscount Fergus asked expectantly. "If the target is a murderous level blood fiend, I can control a total of 20 of them." 20? Viscount Fergus's eyes lit up, and a look of pleasant surprise bloomed on his face. 20 murderous level blood fiends. Even if they couldn't use their blood fiend abilities, it was still enough to kill a berserker level blood fiend. It was no wonder that Gray had brought back the blood of a berserker level blood fiend. "If the target is a berserker level blood fiend, I can control a maximum of 4 of them." Gray continued. "You can control berserker level blood fiends? And you can control 4 of them?" Upon hearing this, Viscount Fergus, who was already pleasantly surprised, couldn't hide the shock on his face. Regardless of whether it was the blood fiend's ability or the magic weapon, they all had their own limits. However, he didn't expect that the magic weapon Gray had obtained would have such a high limit. Not only could it control murderous level blood fiends, but it could also control berserker level blood fiends. Moreover, he could control 4 of them at once. For berserker level blood fiends that couldn't use their blood fiend abilities, with his combat power, an ordinary berserker would be able to contend against 2 people. One could only imagine how powerful this magic weapon was. "Good, very good." After a while, Viscount Fergus regained his composure. His eyes were filled with anticipation for the future of the Fergus family. Things like cultivation talent might be good in one generation, but it might not be good in the next generation. If this generation couldn't do it, it might not be the same in the next generation. Although there were some genetic factors, it couldn't be controlled. However, magic weapons were different. Chapter 192. A young man dressed as a servant was driving a carriage at high speed on the road. Gray was sitting in the carriage. Tout City was the largest city in Marquis Stewart's territory. It was quite far from Viscount Fergus's territory. Therefore, Gray immediately set off after receiving the news. Viscount Fergus had given him a total of 1,000,000 gold coins for this trip. Fortunately, the Fergus family had made a fortune from the Red Leaf Forest. Otherwise, they might not have been able to fork out such a huge sum of money. Apart from that, Gray also took out 500,000 gold coins from his private vault in case of any accidents. He was determined to get the Gale Wolf's blood essence this time. After all, if he missed this opportunity, he didn't know when he would get another one. With the speed at which his strength was increasing, it was very likely that he wouldn't be able to wait until then. Gray looked at the other side of the carriage. There, a 3-meter-long leopard-type blood fiend was quietly curled up. It was one of the 4 berserk-level blood fiends. It's a pity that the other 3 blood fiends are too big to bring along. On the way to Tout City, they would have to pass through many densely populated areas. Apart from the leopard-type blood fiend, the other 3 blood fiends were each bigger than the other. It was really inconvenient to bring them along, so he only brought the leopard-type blood fiend with him. I hope there won't be too much trouble. He had brought a lot of money with him this time. What he was going to do would cause quite a commotion. In addition, he was an outsider and could easily attract covetous eyes. Fortunately, with his and the leopard-type blood fiend's strength, it wouldn't be a problem to take on 3 to 5 berserk warriors. Even if he encountered berserk warriors, he could use the leopard-type blood fiend as a temporary mount and rely on its speed to escape. I wonder if I can buy the blood of other blood fiends apart from the Gale Wolf's blood essence. The reason why he took out 500,000 gold coins from his private vault was to prevent the Gale Wolf's blood essence from being insufficient. On the other hand, he wanted to see if he could find the blood of other blood fiends. If he could find blood that could greatly increase his strength after consuming it, he would naturally buy it without hesitation. Although he had already decided on the type of blood he would consume next time, he would never complain about having too much blood that could greatly increase his strength. 10 days later, the carriage was only half a day away from Tout City. Along the way, they encountered several waves of bandits, but they were all easily annihilated by him. He had no sympathy for the robbers. He knew that most of these people were civilians who were dissatisfied with the current situation of being oppressed by the nobles. However, if he was dissatisfied with the current situation, he could become a mercenary. Robbing others of their belongings and killing the innocent should not be done. Guru. As the carriage moved forward, a group of about 10 people appeared in front of the carriage. There was a carriage in the middle, surrounded by dozens of guards on horseback. Some of the guards were wearing battle armor. It was obvious that the person in the carriage was not an ordinary person. However, they seemed to have encountered some trouble and stopped on the road. "Young master, the road ahead is blocked." The servant outside the carriage who was in charge of driving the horses said to Gray, "Let's go around the grass." Gray opened the curtains and took a look. There was a grassland beside the road that could be bypassed, so he ordered the servant. "Yes, young master." The footman answered, and pulling at the reins, urged the horse into the meadow beside the road and prepared to go round it. However, at this moment, a young girl in a light yellow dress walked out from the group and called out to Gray's carriage. "Please wait a moment." Hearing the call, the servant stopped the carriage. Gray raised his eyebrows and opened the curtains to look in the direction of the voice. There was a very beautiful girl there, especially her pair of light purple eyes, which were exceptionally eye-catching. "May I ask what is the matter?" Gray asked, nodding to the other party. "Hello. Our carriage has broken down. Can we take a ride in your carriage?" The young girl in the light yellow dress asked. "I'm sorry, but the carriage is full." Gray politely refused without any hesitation. If it were any other time, he wouldn't mind giving her a ride. It wasn't because she was beautiful, but because it wasn't easy to go out. Back then, when he went out alone, Sophia took care of him and saved him the trouble of squeezing into a carriage with a group of people. If he had the ability, he wouldn't mind helping this young girl in the yellow dress. Unfortunately, there was a leopard blood fiend curled up in his carriage. Not only did it take up a lot of space, but he couldn't show it to anyone. After all, his ability to control corpses was his trump card, and he couldn't let a stranger know about it. "We're about to reach Tout City. Can we squeeze in a little?" The young girl in the yellow dress frowned imperceptibly, and then a sweet smile appeared on her face. The nearest city was Tourette City. Even if their destination wasn't Tourette City, they would still pass by it. That was why the young girl in the yellow dress stopped Gray's carriage. Sorry. Gray shook his head. It wasn't a matter of squeezing. Of course, he couldn't tell her this. Why are you like this? Seeing that Gray still refused, the smile on the young girl's face disappeared. She put her hands on her hips, and her chest heaved up and down. Her beautiful purple eyes glared at Gray angrily. All right, didn't the others already say that the carriage is full? A young girl in a white dress walked over. Her appearance was somewhat similar to the young girl in the yellow dress. Compared to the young girl in the yellow dress, her breasts were towering, and one could clearly see her curves. She was just like a mature young girl. But, sister, the young girl in the yellow dress frowned and wanted to refute. We're not far from Tourette City. Let's change into our battle armor and ride over. The girl in the white dress said. All right. Seeing that the girl in the white dress had made up her mind, the young girl in the yellow dress could only nod in agreement. Sorry to disturb you. It's fine now. After persuading the young girl in the yellow dress, the girl in the white dress bowed slightly to Gray and said. The other party's refined and courteous attitude caused Gray to feel a little embarrassed. However, it was true that he could not allow these two people to enter the carriage. Gray could only say that. Sorry. He nodded to the girl in the white dress and let down the curtains, indicating for the servants to continue on their way. On the way, the group of people they met just now overtook them on horseback and headed towards Tourette City. In the afternoon, a huge and majestic city appeared in front of Gray's eyes. This was a huge city that wasn't any smaller than Sydney City. It was as majestic as a mountain, standing tall on a plain. Because nobles weren't allowed here, the carriages obediently lined up and paid the fee to enter the city. The city was bustling with people moving about, and it was obvious that there were quite a lot of people in the city. After searching for a while, Gray found a decent tavern not far from the auction house and booked a room with a training room. After washing up, Gray left the room and went down to the restaurant on the first floor. He found an empty table to eat. Sister, look, it's that guy. In a corner of the restaurant, the young girl in the yellow dress pointed in Gray's direction and said in surprise. The girl in the white dress also looked at Gray in surprise. She didn't expect to meet him again in a tavern, and it seemed that they were both staying here. Damn it, that guy said it was full. Look, he's the only one here. Seeing Gray sitting down to eat alone, the girl in the yellow dress was so angry that her teeth itched. The girl in the white dress also raised an eyebrow, but she didn't look as bitter as the girl in the yellow dress. After all, the carriage belonged to the other party, and it was his freedom to let them sit in it. However, she looked down on Gray in her heart and thought that such a person wasn't worth befriending. Humph. The girl in the yellow dress rolled her eyes, and she couldn't help but think of ways to teach Gray a lesson. Forget it. The carriage belongs to someone else. It's his freedom to let us sit in it. Seeing that the girl in the yellow dress wanted to teach Gray a lesson, the girl in the white dress hurriedly stopped her. After a long while, the girl in the yellow dress finally calmed down. When the two girls noticed Gray, Gray also noticed them. He naturally guessed that they had seen through his lies. This luck isn't a little too bad? Gray felt a little awkward. Tout City was so big, and he thought that they wouldn't meet again. He didn't expect to meet them again. Chapter 193. Soon after, Gray discovered that he lived next door to these two girls. Every time he returned from sightseeing, he would run into them. The girl in yellow snorted coldly every time they met, clearly holding a grudge against him. Although the girl in white did not do the same, she looked at him with a cold gaze, clearly categorizing him as someone who was not easy to befriend. After the initial awkwardness, Gray no longer cared about the two's attitude. After all, he had his reasons for rejecting them. Besides, he had no plans to further his relationship with them. A few days later, the auction was about to begin. Gray rode a carriage to the auction house. Nobles who were not from the Marquis of Tolt naturally did not enjoy special treatment. Gray sat in the ordinary seats on the first floor, waiting for the auction to begin. About half an hour later, an old man walked up to the auction stage. Thank you all for attending this auction. The auction will now officially begin. The old man coughed lightly, then announced the start of the auction. Today's first item is the Blue Tears earring, crafted by Grandmaster Konga Jewelry over several years. The starting price is 100 gold coins, and each increment must be no less than 10 gold coins. The bidding begins now. 150 gold coins, 200 gold coins, 250 gold coins. In the end, the item was bought by a noblewoman for 1,300 gold coins. The second item is a runic fan crafted by Runemaster Jonah. It can produce cool winds while rotating. The starting price is 200 gold coins, and each increment must be no less than 10 gold coins. The bidding begins now. 250 gold coins, 300 gold coins, 400 gold coins. In the end, the runic fan was bought for 2,000 gold coins. The third item, the fourth item, Gray listened to the bidding in silence, but did not participate in the auction. The auction held in Tourette City was clearly of a higher level than the Ford Auction House's auction that he had attended before. If the auction held by the Ford Auction House was considered a low-end auction, then this one was a high-end auction. Gray wasn't surprised, since the blood essence of a desolate level Gale Wolf would appear in an auction. The level of this auction couldn't be low. Moreover, Gray reckoned that there were quite a few nobles like him on the first floor of the auction house who came from other territories, as well as the descendants of nobles. This was because even though the final price was easily over 1,000 gold coins, there were still a lot of people bidding on the first floor. The 15th lot, the 21st item, the 26th item, the 30th item. On the auction stage, there was a bronze vase that was more than 10 centimeters tall on a tray. The old auctioneer spoke. 10 sets of blood beast frost tiger blood. The starting price is 1,000 gold coins. Each increment must be no less than 100 gold coins. The bidding starts now. Frost tiger? Forget it. His ability can only be considered average. Gray gave it some thought and ultimately gave up on bidding for the frost tiger blood. The frost tiger was a berserk-level blood beast in the Hanhu sequence. In terms of ability, it was an upgraded version of Hanhu. If there wasn't any jade lizard blood, he wouldn't mind buying it. This way, when his strength reached the berserk level, his blood beast ability would have a stronger ice characteristic. As for the ice characteristic of Hanhu in his body, it had already been developed to the limit. After all, Hanhu was only a murderous level blood beast. If he didn't consume the blood of a higher level frost tiger, even if his strength reached the berserk level, his ice characteristic wouldn't be enhanced. However, after obtaining the jade lizard, he wasn't interested in it. The power of the frost tiger's ice ability was only average among berserk-level blood beasts. Even if he wanted to enhance the ice characteristic of his blood beast after reaching the berserk level, he would have to look for blood beasts with extremely powerful ice abilities. 1,200 gold coins, 1,500 gold coins, 2,000 gold coins. Gray gave up, but many people participated in the auction. Generally speaking, the higher the level of the blood beast, the greater the increase in strength after consuming it. Even if the blood method wasn't of the Hanhu sequence, as long as the ability of the blood method was inclined towards ice, there would be a good increase in strength. As for why these people didn't buy or bid for blood beasts of the same sequence as themselves, it wasn't that they didn't want to, but that it was difficult to encounter one. For example, Gray entered the Red Leaf Forest this time. He originally wanted to hunt gale wolves and use their blood to aid his cultivation, but he didn't encounter any. The same was true for the hunting teams that entered the forest to hunt blood beasts. Under normal circumstances, it was completely up to luck to be able to hunt blood beasts. As for why the Fergus family was able to buy gale wolf blood and gale wolf blood essence from the Sydney family, it was because the Sydney family had a specialized hunting team that stored the blood after a long period of hunting. In the end, the blood of the frost tiger was bought for 5,300 gold coins. The auction continued. The 32nd lot, 10 portions of blood of the berserk-level blood beast thorn monkey. The 34th lot, 10 portions of blood of the berserk-level blood beast whirlpool turtle. The 36th lot, 10 portions of blood of the berserk-level blood beast mantis. The 40th lot, 10 portions of blood of the berserk-level blood beast bull. In the last auction, whenever Gray heard that the auction item was blood beast blood, He would listen carefully. However, he would give up after listening for a while. It wasn't that he didn't understand the types of blood beasts. For some of the rarer blood types, the auctioneer would explain the corresponding abilities of the blood beasts. He would only judge after listening to the auctioneer. The 42nd lot. On the auction platform, a light blue metal wrist appeared in front of everyone. The wrist was covered in runes, exquisite and beautiful. This is a rune wrist made by Master Norris. It will automatically activate in the face of danger. After activation, it can withstand 100 attacks from a Berserk warrior and 10 attacks from a Berserk warrior. The starting price is 10,000 gold coins, and each increase must be no less than 1,000 gold coins. The auction begins now. 13,000 gold coins, 15,000 gold coins, 17,000 gold coins. After listening to the auctioneer's introduction, the bidding continued. Even Gray couldn't help but feel a fire in his heart. Although it could only withstand 10 attacks from a Berserk warrior, it was the best way to save one's life at a critical moment. When facing a Berserk warrior, not to mention 10 times, even 1 or 2 times would be good enough. Maybe because of this 1 or 2 times, reinforcements would arrive in time and save one's life. This was especially true for someone like Gray, who could command a Berserk blood beast stronger than him. 10 times of protection was enough for him to mobilize a Berserk blood beast to come to his aid. I must get it. Thinking of this, Gray immediately called out a price, 40,000 gold coins. 45,000 gold coins. 47,000 gold coins. However, his bid was quickly drowned out by other bids. Obviously, everyone wanted a life-saving method. 100,000 gold coins. 103,000 gold coins. Fortunately, when the price exceeded 100,000, the bids became sparse. 105,000 gold coins. Gray bid without the slightest hesitation. The annual tax income of a Viscount family was only about 10,000 gold coins. 100,000 gold coins would take a Viscount family at least 20 years to accumulate. Obviously, this price was very expensive. However, things like money were not as valuable as life. In addition, this thing could be said to be extremely useful to him. No matter what, he had to get it. Now, he was glad that he brought an extra 500,000 gold coins. Otherwise, he would have missed this good thing. 110,000 gold coins. On the first floor of the auction house, a man gritted his teeth and bid. 115,000 gold coins. Gray continued to bid. 120,000 gold coins. The man gritted his teeth even harder. 125,000 gold coins. Gray increased the price without hesitation. At this time, in the auction house, only Gray and that man were still bidding. It's that guy. In a VIP room on the second floor of the auction house, a girl in a yellow dress and a girl in a white dress were sitting inside. When only Gray and another man were bidding, the girl in the yellow dress immediately noticed Gray. I didn't expect this guy to be so rich. The girl in the yellow dress curled her lips. A bid of more than 100,000 gold coins, even with her family background, had to be taken seriously. However, seeing Gray's appearance and almost no hesitation, it was obvious that Gray's wealth was definitely far greater than this. She rolled her eyes and then looked at the girl in the white dress with a fawning expression. "Sister, this guy seems to be determined to get the arm. Should we?" She was still brooding over Gray's refusal to let them ride the carriage. "No." The girl in the white dress interrupted the girl in the yellow dress. She knew the girl in the yellow dress too well. So before the girl in the yellow dress finished speaking, she immediately understood that the girl in the yellow dress wanted to raise the price of the arm and make Gray suffer a hidden loss. Although she really didn't like Gray, she didn't want to do so, because once she did so, it was almost certain that she would become enemies with the other party. Although she wasn't afraid with her family background, she didn't want to add enemies for no reason. 140,000 gold coins. 150,000 gold coins. In the end, the arm was bought by Gray for 150,000 gold coins. The auction continued. 45th auction item. 47th auction item. Although the following auction items were also quite good, it wasn't to the point where Gray had to buy at all costs. In addition, He didn't know how high the price of the Gale Wolf's blood essence would be, so he didn't participate in the auction. Finally, an exquisite small bronze bottle appeared on the auction stage. The auctioneer looked around and said with a smile, Chapter 194, 130,000, 160,000, 200,000, 400, 0, 0, 0, 600, 0, 0, 0. The auction began. Most of the bidders were for the private rooms on the second floor. There were only a few people on the first floor, including Gray. As the price rose, these people lost their voices one after another. In the end, only Gray was left. In this way, he was quite eye-catching. In an auction of this level, those who could sit in a private room on the second floor naturally had an extraordinary status. Gray, on the other hand, was only able to sit in an ordinary seat on the first floor. It was obvious that his status was not too high. Under such circumstances, it was hard not to attract attention if he had the ability to compete with the people in the private rooms on the second floor. Gray also knew this. He had expected this when he came. However, the blood essence of the Gale Wolf was something he needed. Even if it was too eye-catching, he had to buy it. 650,000. In the private room on the second floor, the voice of an old man was heard. 680,000. It was also from the private room on the second floor. This time, it was the voice of a middle-aged woman. 700,000. It was Gray's voice. 720,000. It was the voice of an old man. 760,000. It was the voice of a middle-aged woman. 800,000. Gray continued to raise the price. At this point, only Gray and the two people in the private rooms on the second floor were left. Gray's purpose was to use the blood essence for implantation. However, he did not know the purpose of these two people. Since Sophia was able to trade the blood essence of the Gale Wolf sequence, the Fergus family and the family behind Sophia should not be the only ones who had the blood essence of the Gale Wolf sequence. After all, if this thing really belonged to a family, that family would not trade it. In addition, the blood essence was the most essential part of the blood of a blood fiend. Although the most common use was to implant a bloodline, it was not without other uses. Therefore, Gray could not guess the purpose of these two people bidding for the Gale Wolf's blood essence. 820,000. It was the voice of a middle-aged woman. 860,000. It was the voice of an old man. 900,000. It was Gray's voice. 920,000. 940,000. The price was over 900,000. The old man's voice disappeared, and only Gray and the middle-aged woman remained. 1 million. The middle-aged woman's expression was unsightly. Originally, she had estimated that she would be able to buy it for 900,000 yuan, but now it had exceeded 100,000 yuan. This made her very unhappy. 102 million. Gray continued to bid, but he was rejoicing in his heart. Fortunately, he had brought an extra 500,000. Otherwise, he would have missed out on the Gale Wolf's blood essence. 104 million. The middle-aged woman said with a cold expression. 106 million. Gray quoted a price. 108 million. The middle-aged woman's face was so gloomy that water could drip from it. A cold light flickered in her eyes. 1 million. Gray continued to bid. Following his bid, the middle-aged woman's voice fell silent. Even after the auctioneer confirmed that the bid was successful, the middle-aged woman's voice did not appear again. Gray breathed a sigh of relief. Although he still had about 1,400,000 gold coins left, he was still a little afraid that the final price would exceed this number. Fortunately, such a thing did not happen. How much money does this guy have? In a private room on the second floor, the yellow-dressed girl covered her mouth and stared at Gray in surprise. After bidding for the arm and wrist for 150,000 yuan, he also bid for the Gale Wolf's blood essence for 1 million yuan. These two items added up to more than 25 million yuan. Moreover, it should not be all that this guy had. Even if she had an extraordinary background, she could not help but be slightly surprised. The white-dressed girl did not speak, but her brows were knitted together. Since he was sitting on the first floor, it meant that Gray's status should not be too high. Suddenly revealing such a large amount of wealth would easily attract covetous eyes. In another private room on the second floor, the middle-aged woman who gave up the bid had a cold look in her eyes. She ordered a middle-aged man beside her. "Go and investigate this person." "Yes, madam." The middle-aged man respectfully replied and left. Not only the middle-aged woman, but many people did the same thing at the same time. If it were the people in the private rooms on the second floor, many of them would not have such thoughts. After all, to be able to sit in a private room on the second floor in this kind of auction, one's status was naturally not ordinary. However, since it was the people in the private rooms on the first floor, they could not help but have thoughts. As the auctioneer, the old man who was the auctioneer was obviously very happy that the Gale Wolf's blood essence could be auctioned at a high price of 1,000,000 yuan. He smiled and said, "Now, let's start the auction of the 50th item. This is also the last item of this auction." He removed the black cloth covering the tray, and a dagger that had been pulled out from its sheath appeared in front of them. The dagger was white, but there were mysterious green patterns on the surface. It looked extremely strange and mysterious. This item came from a ruin. After the auction house's appraisal, it is confirmed to be a bronze-grade magical weapon. At this point, his voice paused slightly. Its attribute is that it can turn the target it killed into a spirit and imprison it in the dagger to fight for you. What? Did I hear wrongly? The auctioneer said that this dagger can turn the target it killed into a spirit? Things like spirits really exist? The auctioneer's words caused a commotion in the auction hall. The sound of chatter was endless. What were spirits? Everyone present knew. Some of them were legends passed down by word of mouth, and some of them were read in books about the supernatural. Although they had heard of them or seen them in books, not many people would believe them. Most people generally regarded them as a kind of fictional existence. However, at this moment, the auctioneer in front of them actually said that the target it killed would be turned into a spirit. Did that mean that spirits really existed? Bronze grade? It can turn the target it killed into a spirit? Gray, who did not care about the auction at the end and only wanted to wait for the auction to end to retrieve the item, had a look of surprise in his eyes. He was not surprised by the existence of spirits. After all, he had seen spirits before. Instead, he was surprised by the grade of this dagger and the ability of this dagger. Magic weapons had different grades, and he only knew about it recently. The reason was because Viscount Fergus suspected that the magic weapon that could control corpses was a bronze-grade weapon. That was why he had popularized it to him. According to Viscount Fergus, the lowest grade of magic weapon was dark iron grade. Gray's magic sword and Viscount Fergus's own magic sword were of this grade. Above that was bronze grade. Weapons of this grade were very rare. Every one of them was extremely valuable. It would be easy to sell them for millions. Moreover, there was no market for them. Above that, there seemed to be even higher grade weapons. However, with Viscount Fergus's identity, he could not come into contact with them. He did not know what kind of weapons they were or what they were called. The reason he knew about bronze-grade magic weapons was because the current Marquis of the Sidney family had a bronze-grade magic weapon. He did not expect that the dagger in front of him was a genuine bronze-grade weapon. Moreover, it was probably not ordinary among bronze-grade weapons. After all, the dagger's ability was to create spirits. He had experienced how difficult it was to deal with spirits. If he did not have the means to restrain spirits, it would be useless no matter how strong he was. One could imagine the high value of this weapon, not to mention others. Even he could not help but be envious. Unfortunately, he could only be envious. He, who had bid for the Gale Wolf blood essence, definitely did not have the ability to bid for this dagger. Ahem, everyone, please be quiet. The old man, who was the auctioneer, coughed twice to draw the attention of the crowd to himself. I know that everyone has doubts about the existence of spirits and the ability of this weapon. Therefore, this auction will prove it on the spot. Speaking until here, he clapped his hands. Suddenly, a tiger that was tied to a handcart was pushed out, violently struggling. The old man picked up the dagger and stabbed it into the tiger's heart. As blood spurted out, the tiger's struggles slowly weakened and finally disappeared. Using a white towel to wipe the dagger clean, the old man held the dagger horizontally. Whoosh! A misty white light shone from the dagger. Finally, under everyone's astonished gazes, the light transformed into the image of a tiger. A cold wind blew, causing the temperature of the auction hall's front desk to drop by a few degrees. A few people sitting in the front row could not help but shrink back, except for a few people who already knew about it. Everyone looked at the fierce tiger in front of them in astonishment. The common sense they had formed all this time was shattered. Spirits really existed. This dagger could actually create spirits. 250,000, 300,000, 350,000. Amidst the shock of the people on the first floor and the intense bidding on the second floor, this bronze-grade magic weapon was finally auctioned off for 2,200,000. If Gray did not hear wrongly, the final winner of this bronze-grade magic weapon should be that pair of sisters. His previous guess was not wrong. The other party had indeed come for the auction. Moreover, their identity was not ordinary. After all, they were able to sit in a private room on the second floor. Chapter 195. The next morning, Gray checked out of his room and left the city as soon as the city gates opened. Throwing out 25 million gold coins in one go might have attracted some people's attention. He wanted to leave as soon as the auction ended, but the city gates were closed and he couldn't do that. A few hours later, he was already quite far away from Tute City. However, the robbery that he was expecting did not happen. However, Gray didn't relax because of this. He knew that your performance at the auction house last night would definitely attract covetous eyes. Rustle, 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 roar. The horse pulling the carriage was startled. It raised its two front legs and stopped in a hurry. Gray pulled open the curtains and looked outside. He saw a masked man standing in front of the carriage. He could only tell from his attire and Adam's apple that he was a man. The masked man grinned and rushed towards the carriage. Whoosh! Gray hurriedly jumped down from the carriage and pounced on the man. The magic sword in his hand was surrounded by lightning as he stabbed at the man. Seeing Gray's speed, the man's expression changed. A battle axe appeared in his hand, surrounded by green light, and blocked the sword. He was one of the people who had targeted Gray at the auction. A young man with more than 1 million gold coins without any guards was like a walking wallet. That was why he followed Gray as soon as he left the city. However, it seemed that this young man was not simple. Judging from his speed, he must be a ferocious warrior who specialized in speed. He finally felt that this huge sum of money was not so easy to get. Clang! The side of the battle axe blocked the sword. The lightning did not enter the man's body. The battle axe in his hand was also a magic weapon. Its specialty was to increase the weapon's sharpness. Pack! Pack! The man couldn't help but take a few steps back. His expression darkened. The force from the battle axe was stronger than expected. He thought that the young man specialized in speed, but now it seemed that the young man was not only fast, but also strong. This young man was very strong. He regretted making a move. Wealth could move people's hearts, but how could a person with so much wealth not have some skills? This was a very simple logic. If one calmed down and thought about it, any normal person would be able to think of it. It was just that the huge wealth had blinded his eyes, causing him to lose this kind of judgment. At the same time, it was not without a kind of wishful thinking. Gray did not know what the man was thinking. Even if he knew what the man was thinking, he would not give up. Since the man dared to rob him, he had to be prepared to pay with his life. Clang, clang, clang. Holding the demonic power sword, which was surrounded by lightning, Gray attacked one after another. Puff! After several attacks, the axe in the man's hand was deflected away. Gray's sword pierced straight into the man's chest. In the process, although the man used his blood fiend ability and unleashed several stone spikes to attack Gray, they were easily dodged by Gray. Patter! The sword was pulled out, and blood flowed from the corner of the man's mouth. His eyes were filled with unwillingness as he fell. If he could go back on his words, he would definitely run as far away as possible. Unfortunately, there were no ifs. After picking up the man's axe and wallet, Gray returned to the carriage as if he had just done something very ordinary. He let the servant driving the carriage continue on his way. With his current strength, he could defeat two ordinary ferocious blood warriors even if they joined forces. Naturally, it would not be too easy for him to deal with one person. He did not even use his blood fiend ability. The reason why he was so calm was because many murderous grade combatants had died in his hands. Not counting the murderous blood beasts, he had already killed 9 ferocious blood warriors. If he counted the murderous blood beasts, it would be more than 20. Another few hours passed, and it was already afternoon. Gray did not encounter any more assassination attempts. He did not know if it was because he had killed the man with lightning speed, which intimidated the others. He remained vigilant. Suddenly, his expression changed. Without hesitation, he rushed out of the carriage and saw masked figures darting out from the forest on both sides. 1, 2, 3, 4. A total of 4 figures darted out and blocked the carriage's path. All 4 of them were masked. One of them was the person who had followed the middle-aged woman's orders to investigate Gray in the private room last night. After investigating and finding out that Gray only had one master and one servant, the middle-aged woman ordered him and 3 other companions to attack Gray. Originally, he wanted to let the other covetous people take the lead and observe Gray's strength. However, after Gray killed a ferocious blood warrior without using his blood fiend ability, many people had secretly retreated. Even those who did not retreat merely watched in secret. Seeing that no one was willing to help them test Gray's strength, he finally decided to make a move. 4 people. Gray frowned slightly. Although he had not seen the 4 of them make a move, he knew that they were not weak from the speed at which they had dashed out from the forest. They were most likely ferocious blood warriors. He tightened his grip on the sword in his hand. In the carriage, the leopard blood fiend, which had been curled up, raised its head. He believed that he could handle 2 ferocious blood warriors. As for 4, he could only let the leopard blood fiend take action. Clop, clop, clop. Just as the battle was about to break out, an unexpected scene occurred. Following the sound of many hooves, a group of dozens of people rapidly approached from behind. Seeing the confrontation in front of them, the group of dozens of people could not help but be startled and quickly stopped. This group was the group that the 2 women were in. The 2 of them had come for the auction. After the auction ended, they would naturally return along the same path. Apparently, they had taken the same route as Gray, which was why they had encountered each other. It's that fellow's carriage. Lifting the curtain and seeing the carriage in front, the yellow-dressed girl immediately recognized that it was Gray's carriage. She was too resentful and had a deep impression of Gray's carriage. Ahead, this is bad. Knowing that the one who was in trouble was Gray, the yellow-dressed girl could not help but gloat. She had always wanted to teach Gray a lesson, but due to her sister's obstruction, she had never had the chance. Now that she saw Gray in trouble, the depression that had accumulated in her heart for the past few days was finally swept away, leaving behind a gloating expression. The white-dressed girl also looked at the 2 parties in front of her and raised her eyebrows. Seeing her sister's reaction, the yellow-dressed girl could not help but say anxiously, "Sister, you're not thinking of helping that fellow, are you? Besides, we're also in trouble now." Given her resentment towards Gray, it was already good enough that she did not add insult to injury when Gray was in trouble, let alone help him. No, the white-dressed girl shook her head. If the previous incident had not happened, she might have helped the other party. But now, she definitely would not. Moreover, just as her sister had said, their current situation was not good either because they had also encountered a wave of assassination. Although they had an extraordinary status, they were still unable to withstand the desperation of those who wanted to take risks. There was no lack of daring people in this world. Besides, as long as they did it cleanly, there was no guarantee that they would be found out later. It's them. While keeping his guard up against the 4 people, Gray looked back and saw that it was the team of the 2 girls. He could not help but raise his eyebrows. His relationship with the 2 girls could not be said to be good. Would these 2 fellows take advantage of the situation to rob him? After thinking about it, he decided to strike quickly and end the battle as soon as possible. He could not give the 2 girls any chance to take advantage of the situation. He cast out an icy wind blade and quickly slashed in the direction of the 4 people. Without waiting to see the result, He quickly pounced on the four people and unsheathed the demonic sword in his hand. At the same time, the leopard blood fiend also rushed out from the carriage. Swish! Faced with a wind blade that was slashing at them, the four people dodged to the side. Just when the four people thought that they had dodged, they were surprised to find that a gust of cold air had spread out. Even though they were close to the wind blade, there were actually specks of frost on their bodies. It's cold air. The four people's expressions changed. Although they had rich combat experience, they did not expect the wind blade to be mixed with cold air. Immediately, they were at a disadvantage. Whoosh! Gray had already rushed to the front and slashed at the person who bore the brunt of the attack. Although the person's body was slightly frozen, he still managed to block the sword with his saber horizontally. The other three immediately prepared to surround Gray from both sides and attack him from all sides. At this moment, Poochie, the sound of flesh being slashed rang out. Claw marks appeared on the throat of one of the men who had surrounded Gray from the side. Blood spurted out, but in the end, there was no more sound. With his eyes wide open, he fell to the ground weakly with a thud. What? The sudden scene caused the other two people who were about to surround Gray to turn pale. They looked up and saw that one of their companions had died. A leopard blood fiend appeared at the place where their companion died and was now pouncing on the two of them. The two of them did not have the time to surround Gray. With panicked expressions, they slashed at the leopard blood fiend. Whoosh! The leopard blood fiend gently twisted its body and dodged the two people's attacks. It circled to the side of one of them and clawed at him. Immediately, blood flowed out from the man's chest, and he was sent flying. Then, it pounced on the other person and also clawed at him, injuring him. Back then, it took a total of 15 blood fiends and a mad-level blood fiend to finally surround and kill this leopard blood fiend. Now, there are only 2 ferocious blood warriors. How could they be a match for the leopard blood fiend? After the 2 people got up, they hurriedly used their blood fiend abilities to stop the leopard blood fiend from approaching. However, the leopard blood fiend easily dodged their attacks. After a few claw attacks, their stomachs were cut open and their intestines spilled out. On the other side, Gray was facing a ferocious blood warrior, the man who was in the same private room as the middle-aged woman. Due to the cold air, the man's body was slightly stiff. After a dozen moves, Gray killed him as well. Chapter 196. That fellow is so strong. The yellow-dressed girl's gloating expression froze on her face. She even rubbed her eyes. After a while, she finally uttered this sentence. Born in a great aristocratic family, she was naturally knowledgeable. From the exchange of blows, she could naturally determine that the 4 people fighting with the other party were all ferocious blood warriors. However, these 4 ferocious blood warriors were actually killed by the other party and a leopard in a short period of time. One could imagine how strong the other party was. So strong. The white-dressed girl's eyes were also filled with shock. The leopard-type blood fiend was definitely strong. After all, the 3 ferocious blood warriors only lasted for a short while before being killed by the leopard-type blood fiend. In her opinion, Gray was also extremely strong. Facing a ferocious blood warrior, he was actually able to kill them in just a dozen exchanges. Even she, who cultivated a special blood technique, might not be able to do so. She finally understood why the other party was so confident in carrying such a large amount of wealth. She also understood why the other party had rejected her request to ride in the carriage. Obviously, the other party had rejected them because there was a leopard-type blood fiend hidden in the carriage. Could that be a berserk wind leopard? The yellow-dressed girl stared blankly at the leopard-type blood fiend that had easily killed the 3 ferocious blood warriors. It can't be wrong. A man in yellow battle armor with many wrinkles on his face appeared beside the carriage on horseback. His expression was solemn as he spoke. Uncle Craig, are you confident in facing that Wind Rider leopard? Sensing the man's solemn expression, the white-dressed girl was shocked and could not help but ask. I won't lose, but it will be difficult to win. The man in yellow battle armor, Craig, said seriously. The white-dressed girl and the yellow-dressed girl looked at each other and could see the intense shock in each other's eyes. The man in yellow battle armor, Craig, was sent by their father to protect their safety. He was a genuine berserk blood warrior and had rich combat experience. He had even been on the battlefield before. However, such a person actually said something like, "I won't lose, but it will be difficult to win." One could imagine the strength of this wind leopard. At this moment, both of them were incomparably glad. Although they complained that the other party was unreasonable, they did not punish him in the end. Otherwise, they would have really made a great enemy. With their family strength, they were not afraid. However, this was not their family's territory, and they only had this much strength. "Miss, I suggest we cooperate with them." The man in yellow battle armor, Craig, after pondering for a moment, said seriously, "Cooperate." The white-dressed girl raised her eyebrows as she pondered the possibility. She naturally understood why the man in yellow battle armor, Craig, said, now that the other party had been ambushed, and so had they. Moreover, both parties were quite strong. If they could work together, it would indeed be easier for them to get through this crisis. She and ferocious blood fiends, blood warriors, and ferocious blood warriors, Craig, ferocious blood warriors, Craig, ferocious. Blood, ferocious blood, ferocious blood, ferocious bloods, right, ferocious, ferocious. He was a little surprised by the leopard-type blood fiend's battle prowess. Facing 3 ferocious blood warriors, the leopard-type blood fiend's battle prowess had exceeded his expectations. However, he quickly thought of the reason. Since the violent leopard-type blood fiend did not have the ability of a blood beast, or rather, its ability as a blood beast was based on its physical strength, the leopard-type blood fiend was the only one among the 4 mad-level blood fiends under his control whose strength was not reduced. Since it was a berserk blood fiend with full combat strength, it was not strange for it to have such a performance. What were they trying to do? However, at this moment, he saw the white-dressed girl and a man in yellow battle armor walking over. He raised his eyebrows and signaled the servant to carry the confiscated weapons into the carriage while he waited for the other party to arrive. The strength displayed by ferocious blood fiend gave him a lot of confidence. In addition, he still had his arms. He wanted to see what the other party wanted to do. Cooperate? Gray looked at the white-dressed girl in surprise. He had thought of various reasons, but he did not expect her to come here to seek cooperation. However, he did not reject her immediately. The white-dressed girl's suggestion did make him feel a little strange. Ferocious Blood Fiend had auctioned off a bronze-level magic weapon, so she should be targeted as well. Both parties were in the same situation. If they cooperated, it would be beneficial for both parties. Of course, this depended on the other party's strength. If the other party's strength was a burden to him, he would not agree. Therefore, he asked, "I need to know your approximate strength before I can make a decision." The woman in the white dress was not surprised by Gray's answer. They had also seen how powerful Gray was, which was why they had the idea of cooperating with him. 1 Berserk Blood Warrior and 4 Berserk Blood Warriors. At this point, she looked at the man in yellow battle armor beside her. The man in yellow battle armor understood. He stretched out one hand, and a ferocious beast claw appeared on the surface of his palm. This was undoubtedly a shape-shifting ability that could only be used after reaching the Berserk stage. I agree. Seeing this, Gray no longer hesitated and nodded in agreement. There was no reason to reject a win-win situation. The carriage set off again, but this time, Gray's carriage joined the 2 girls' team. The 2 girls came from the Cumberland Marquee, which happened to be next to the Sydney Marquee. If the route was adjusted, they could travel together for 7 to 8 days. The 2 parties cooperated and moved forward. 2 days later, in the evening, both parties set up their tents. "Be careful!" Suddenly, Gray's expression changed, and he shouted a warning. The moment he spoke, a voice rang out. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. More than 10 people suddenly rushed out from the forest beside them, full of murderous intent. Although his infrared perception could detect targets hiding in the forest, because it was through thermal radiation, the distance was quite short. It was only 20 to 30 meters away. Beyond this distance, he could not detect them. Whoosh! 8 of them directly used their Blood Fiend ability. Tornadoes, orange-yellow fireballs, water arrows, all of them shot towards Gray and the others. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. More than 10 water arrows attacked Gray. Gray quickly dodged and avoided several of them. Then his two arms were like two shields in front of him, blocking two water arrows that could not be dodged in time. After resolving his crisis, Gray looked at the dozen or so people who were rushing over with a dignified expression. Among the dozen people, 8 of them could use their Blood Fiend ability, which meant that there were at least 8 ferocious blood warriors. Moreover, there were so many ferocious blood warriors in the team, so how could there not be any berserk warriors? Whoosh! At this time, the 2 girls' team had already met the dozen people, including the girl in the white dress. After thinking for a while, Gray summoned his leopard blood fiend and rushed over. With the strength of the 2 girls' team and his own strength, they should be able to put up a fight against the dozen people. If they really could not defeat them, it would not be too late to let the leopard blood fiend carry him and escape. Clang, clang, clang. The 2 sides soon began to fight. One of the dozen people took the initiative to meet the man in the yellow battle suit. After exchanging blows, he did not fall into a disadvantageous position. There was no doubt that he was a ferocious blood warrior. Facing Gray and a leopard blood fiend who were rushing toward them, among the dozen people, one of them immediately went to meet the leopard blood fiend, while 2 others went to meet Gray. The person who went to meet the leopard blood fiend was actually able to react quickly when the leopard blood fiend attacked from the side. He reversed the direction of his blade and forced the leopard blood fiend to retreat. Surprisingly, he was also a ferocious blood warrior. 2 ferocious blood warriors. Seeing this scene, Gray's pupil shrank. Facing the powerful combination of him and the 2 girls' team, they still dared to attack. Sure enough, they were confident. There were actually 2 ferocious blood warriors. To be able to bring out 2 ferocious blood warriors, what kind of force was targeting them? Or was it an alliance of many forces? In fact, Gray's guess was close to the truth. This attacking team was made up of several forces. After Gray and the 2 girls bought items worth more than 1,000,000 yuan at a high price, these forces followed them. However, the strength of the 2 parties exceeded their expectations. In the end, they did not expect that the 2 parties would actually join forces. Chapter 197. Crackle, Crackle. Facing the 2 who took the initiative to attack him, Gray's demonic sword was entwined with lightning. He quickly slashed at the leader of the 2. The sword was wrapped in blue and white lightning, looking like a thunderbolt falling from the sky. Boom! The weapons collided. The leader of the 2 was directly knocked back by the force of the collision. Gray immediately prepared to chase after this person. However, at this moment, swish! A flash of sword light quickly attacked him from the side. The biting cold sword wind was like the cold wind of winter, causing his hair to stand on end. Clang! Gray quickly turned around and swept out his sword. With a loud sound, this person was also knocked back by Gray. Just as this person was forced back by Gray, the first person had recovered and attacked Gray again. 2 ferocious blood warriors. There was no doubt that the 2 people attacking Gray were ferocious blood warriors. 2 of you, demonic power entwined around the lightning sword. Gray's face showed a trace of graveness, as well as a trace of eagerness. Whoosh, whoosh. The 2 people rushed at Gray. Ah! With a low roar, Gray slashed out with his frost wind blade. The azure wind blade carried biting cold air as it attacked the 2 people. Dodge! The 2 people had obviously already known from the intelligence that Gray's frost wind blade contained fierce cold air. One of them dodged to the side as if avoiding a snake or a scorpion, avoiding the frost wind blade from a distance. It was also because of this that the distance between the 2 people was extremely wide. Whoosh! Seizing the opportunity, Gray suddenly rushed at one of the 2 people. The demonic sword in his hand was powerful and heavy as he slashed at this person again and again. Clang, clang, clang. This person was continuously knocked back by Gray. His hands became increasingly numb, and it became increasingly difficult for him to resist. Pooh! Finally, he couldn't resist anymore and was slashed in the stomach by Gray. Blood flowed out. Seeing that his companion was injured, the other person knew that things weren't good. He used his Blood Fiend ability, and an orange fireball suddenly attacked Gray. Whoosh! The orange-yellow fireball carried a terrifyingly high temperature. It was like a meteor falling from the sky, quickly smashing towards Gray. The injured man heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that his companion had used his blood beast ability to rescue him. But in the next moment, his expression changed drastically. Whoosh! Faced with the incoming fireball, the other party did not dodge. Instead, he continued to stab his sword straight at his heart. Puff! The sword stabbed into his heart. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. His eyes were filled with fear and confusion. Why did the other party want to kill him, even at the risk of being seriously injured or even dying? Boom! Just as Gray's sword pierced the injured man's heart, the fireball smashed onto Gray's body. There were no surprises. Bang! Gray was sent flying, and the injured man who had his heart pierced was sent flying by the aftermath of the explosion. He was completely dead before he even hit the ground. Is that so? Seeing that Gray was willing to be hit by the fireball to kill his companion, the man who used the fireball had a strange expression on his face. He only had a moment of silence in his heart for his companion to encounter such a crazy opponent. Then, he looked in the direction where Gray was sent flying and rushed over. He and the injured man were just temporarily put together. They did not have any friendship. If he died, he would die. There would be one less person to share the loot with. What? But when he saw that Gray was sent flying by the explosion, the expression on his face suddenly became horrified. He hurriedly stopped his forward movement. Unlike what he had imagined, Gray's body did not show any signs of injury even after being attacked by his blood fiend ability. The only damaged part was the clothes on Gray's left arm. It was completely burned and his entire arm was exposed. Other than that, there was no other injury. Whoosh! After moving his left arm that blocked the fireball and confirming that it was not injured, Gray revealed a sinister smile. He fiercely stomped on the ground and quickly rushed toward the man who used the fireball just now. Facts proved once again that the iron arm of the steel-armed ape was an indestructible shield. Even the blood beast ability of the ferocious blood warrior could not damage it. Not good. The man who used the fireball changed his expression. He hurriedly used another fireball to intercept Gray and quickly retreated. Two people were not a match for each other, not to mention one person. He needed backup. Boom, boom. Two consecutive fireballs were launched, but Gray dodged them. The distance between him and Gray did not widen. Instead, it got closer. Damn it. Looking at the approaching Gray, the man who used the fireball clenched his teeth and quickly slashed at Gray with his sword. Swish! Facing the sword of the man who used the fireball, Gray did not dodge. He stretched out his left hand to block, but his right hand held the sword and slashed at the man's throat. Clang! Poochie! The sword of the man who used the fireball slashed at Gray's hand. Gray's hand was unharmed, but Gray's sword easily slashed the man's throat. Thud! The man who used the fireball did not dare to open his eyes and fell powerlessly. After killing the two men, Gray looked at the leopard blood fiend. The leopard blood fiend was still fighting with the ferocious blood warrior. From time to time, the leopard blood fiend would attack the ferocious blood warrior from all directions. The ferocious blood warrior looked dignified and vigilant. The ferocious blood warrior was already injured. The leopard blood fiend had the upper hand, but the ferocious blood warrior was, after all, a ferocious blood warrior. Looking at the situation, the leopard blood fiend would not be able to defeat the ferocious blood warrior in a short time. After thinking for a while, Gray did not rush to meet up with the leopard blood fiend. Even with the ferocious blood warrior, they might not be able to defeat the ferocious blood warrior quickly. Instead, he looked in another direction. The two women's teams were engaged in an intense battle with the other robbers, but the situation was not good. Although the number of robbers was much smaller, they were all extremely powerful. The number of ferocious blood warriors was even greater, and more than 10 guards had already been killed. The woman in the white dress was besieged by 2 ferocious blood warriors and appeared to be in a rather sorry state. However, her opponent must have cultivated a special blood technique, which made her stronger than ordinary ferocious blood warriors. Even though she was besieged by 2 ferocious blood warriors, she was only at a disadvantage. Swish! Gray directly pounced on one of the ferocious blood warriors who was besieging the woman in the white dress. Suddenly, the ferocious blood warrior felt a strong wind coming from his side. His expression changed, and the war saber in his hand instinctively swept in this direction. Clang! With a loud sound, the ferocious blood warrior retreated continuously and saw the person who attacked him. It was one of the people that they needed to pay special attention to during their previous discussion. For this reason, they even sent out 2 ferocious blood warriors to besiege the other party. But what was going on now? Where were the other 2 people? Without giving the ferocious blood warrior a chance to think further, Gray's sword had already pierced straight at him. Clang, clang, clang. In the face of Gray's powerful attacks that came from all directions, the ferocious blood warrior was no exception. Once again, he followed in the footsteps of his 2 companions and was stabbed to death by Gray's sword. After killing the ferocious blood warrior, Gray immediately pounced in another direction. Meanwhile, the woman in the white dress also killed her opponent after a few exchanges. After killing her opponent, she gazed deeply in Gray's direction before rushing in another direction. If she was not wrong, the other party was also besieged by 2 ferocious blood warriors. She was also at a disadvantage when facing 2 ferocious blood warriors, but the other party was able to counterattack and kill the 2 ferocious blood warriors. The difference in strength between the 2 of them was obvious. She was increasingly unable to understand this person. He did not seem to have any status, but everything he had displayed was extremely shocking. Whether it was his method of controlling the corpses of blood fiends or his counterattack of killing 2 ferocious blood warriors, these are not things that an ordinary descendant of a noble clan could do. Retreat. These 10-odd people came from different factions. Seeing that several of their own had been killed, someone finally turned and fled. Following this person's escape, more and more people followed suit and fled. In the end, the 2 ferocious blood warriors, who were the main force, could only helplessly retreat with their subordinates. After repelling this group of bandits, Gray's group had no intention of pursuing them. Although they had killed a few of the bandits, they had lost even more people on their side. They did not have the spare energy to pursue the bandits. After collecting the corpses and burying them on the spot, the 2 groups continued on their way. Big sister, that guy is very strong. In the carriage of the 2 sisters, the yellow-dressed girl had a trace of fear on her face. She had been ordered to hide in the carriage and had not participated in the previous battle. However, she had been secretly sizing up the battle outside and had seen the entire process of Gray fighting 2 ferocious blood warriors alone before finally killing them. She had originally believed that her big sister's strength would not be inferior to the other parties, but now it seemed that her big sister was still somewhat lacking. Tell me the process of how he defeated those 2 ferocious blood warriors, the woman in white said, after some thought. She was truly very curious as to how exactly the other party had defeated those 2 ferocious blood warriors. As the yellow-dressed girl recounted, the woman in white's expression grew more and more grave. She was even more astonished when she heard that Gray had blocked the ferocious blood warrior's blood fiend ability completely unscathed. She could be considered to be very knowledgeable, but she had never heard of such a blood technique. The blood fiend ability had the characteristics of wind blades and cold air. Its strength and speed were also extremely high, and its defense was so strong that it could block the attack of a ferocious blood warrior's blood fiend ability without suffering any damage. This person gave her a mysterious feeling, an extremely mysterious feeling. In the following days, Gray's group did not encounter any more attacks. Even when they parted ways with the 2 girls and returned to Fergus Castle, they were still not killed. Chapter 198. After returning to the Fergus family, Leyland spent his days cultivating and relaxing. In the blink of an eye, several months had passed since Gray had successfully bought the Gale Wolf's blood essence. In these few months, apart from attending the occasional banquet, Gray spent most of his time in the castle. The second metamorphosis of his body and the cultivation of the blood technique had allowed his strength to improve rapidly. Viscount Fergus might not be able to catch up to him even if he trained for a year. He had already entered the fourth posture of the second blood technique. As long as he completed the fourth posture, he would be able to reach the level of a berserker. If he didn't stay too long at the critical point between a ferocious warrior and a berserker, he estimated that he would be able to reach the level of a berserker in 3 months at most. This was the realm that Viscount Fergus had always wanted to reach. After several months, he estimated that he should be able to consume the blood of a blood fiend again. He lay in the bathtub and soaked his body in hot water. He took out the bronze bottle that contained the jade lizard's blood and drank a mouthful of it as usual. Boom! As if he had swallowed a bomb, a violent reaction appeared in Gray's stomach and spread throughout. He was truly worried that his stomach would explode because of this. Fortunately, this didn't happen. The scorching heat spread throughout his body, causing his skin to turn crimson. A numb feeling washed over his body again and again, causing his senses to slowly become sluggish. Half an hour later, when he regained consciousness, the heat and numbness in his body had disappeared. All that was left was fatigue. After resting for a day, Gray felt that his body had completely recovered the next day. Only then did he begin to test the changes in his body. After thinking for a while, he directly went through the underground tunnel and headed to the forest. He wanted to see how the jade lizard was doing. After a few months, he was truly worried that the jade lizard had rotted. During the hunt, the jade lizard's injuries were the most serious. After all, the jade lizard was too difficult to deal with, and he didn't have the ability to hold back. It's all right. After passing through the door mechanism and arriving at the forest, Gray heaved a sigh of relief when he saw the jade lizard. The ability to control corpses and keep corpses alive was still effective on the jade lizard. The jade lizard's body did not rot, but there were many injuries. It looked shocking. Looking at these injuries, Gray couldn't help but recall the time when he and the Red Wing had surrounded and killed the jade lizard in the Redleaf Forest. It had taken a total of 4 berserk blood fiends, 1 berserker, and several ferocious blood warriors to finally kill it. At the thought of the jade lizard's strength, he could not help but look forward to the changes in his body. I hope it won't disappoint me. With that in mind, Gray began the test. Although it was called a test, it was actually just a test to move his body as much as possible. He wanted to feel his body's condition and compare it with before he consumed the jade lizard's blood. Through running, he could feel the change in his running speed by hammering the rock with his fist. He could feel the changes in his strength by controlling the jade lizard's strength to attack him. He could feel the changes in his body's strength. It was extremely rough, but there was no other way. The Fergus family didn't have any rune items that could specifically test one's physical fitness. It was said that the Sidney family had one, but Gray obviously couldn't go to the Sidney family to borrow it. If that was the case, wouldn't he be completely exposing his background? No changes. After a series of tests, Gray confirmed that his strength, speed, and defense had not improved. Or perhaps the improvement was so small that he couldn't feel it. His current strength, speed, and defense came from the Hanhu, Windwolf, and Shadow Snake blood fiends. He had the advantages of 3 blood fiends in one body. In any aspect, he was already at the top level among blood fiends of the same level. If he wanted to improve, he would probably have to consume the blood of a blood fiend that was at the top of the same level. Although the jade lizard's strength, speed, and defense were equally strong, this was only secondary. It was called a special blood fiend because of its blood fiend ability. Its attacks were powerful, and it had the extremely heaven-defying ability of reverse nurturing. Thinking of this, he looked at the surrounding plants and tried to use the ability to control plants. Swish, swish, swish. A large number of plants in the surroundings suddenly came to life. Even though there was no wind, some of them grew vines, and some of the branches became sharp. Entangle. The thought of entangling the jade lizard appeared in his mind. Immediately, vines twisted like snakes and entangled the jade lizard. In the blink of an eye, Bayushi was completely entangled. The entire jade lizard was wrapped up like a dumpling. Let's test its strength. He ordered the jade lizard to break free from the binding of the vines. Crack, crack, bang. After a violent struggle, the vines that were entangled around the jade lizard were all broken free. After all, the jade lizard was a berserk blood fiend. It was normal for it to be able to break free from Gray's plant control ability, since he was only a vicious blood warrior. However, watching the jade lizard break free, Gray could clearly feel that it wasn't easy for it to break free. It is indeed a very strong plant control ability. Seeing this, Gray couldn't help but nod. Because he was only a vicious blood warrior, his plant control ability couldn't be compared to when he fought with the jade lizard. However, it was already extremely powerful among the murderous blood fiends. Based on his estimation, if they were entangled by these vines, very few murderous level blood fiends would be able to break free. Next is the most important ability. Gray took out a dagger and looked at his invulnerable arm. He had no choice but to pull up his trousers and cut his leg with the dagger. He felt a wave of pain and traces of blood appeared. In order to test the ability to reverse nurture blood fiends, he had gone all out and harmed himself. However, he had no choice. He couldn't possibly wait until he was about to die to test this ability. If he suddenly discovered that the ability to reverse nurture was useless when he was about to die, he would be in big trouble. Buzz. An invisible wave spread out with Gray as the center. The surrounding trees suddenly emitted bits of green light and then quickly gathered in his direction. Swish! In the blink of an eye, the small injury on Gray's leg had recovered. Suddenly, Gray cried out in surprise. The small injury on his leg had already healed, but the green light that was converging did not stop because of this. Instead, it continued to converge on him. In the direction of gathering was the jade lizard, which was standing not far away from him. What is going on? Gray widened his eyes in shock and stared blankly at the jade lizard, which was enveloped by the green light. The wounds on the jade lizard's body that were originally covered in green light were rapidly healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. When the green light disappeared, what appeared in front of him was a completely uninjured jade lizard. It's alive? No, that's not right. Gray took a few big steps back reflexively. Facing a jade lizard that was alive was a disaster. It could kill him in minutes. He heaved a sigh of relief when he was sure that he could still control the jade lizard. Since he could still control it, it wouldn't go berserk. His safety wasn't a problem. He slowly walked in front of the jade lizard and carefully examined it. He hadn't seen wrongly. The jade lizard didn't have a single injury on its body. Its jade-colored scales were as crisp as jade. Other than its slightly dazed eyes, it didn't seem any different from a real jade lizard. He reached out and touched its body. It was cold to the touch, but he heaved a sigh of relief. Since its body was cold, it meant that the jade lizard hadn't come back to life. It was just that its injuries had mysteriously healed. Is it because the jade lizard can use the ability to reverse nurture blood fiends? Or is it because I used the ability to reverse nurture and healed its injuries? Gray was puzzled. Long ago, he had already discovered that the ability of blood fiends that he obtained from swallowing blood wouldn't be absorbed completely. Instead, it would be adjusted according to his own condition. After swallowing the blood of Hanhu's blood fiends, he didn't obtain the ability to spit out cold air. Instead, cold air was mixed into the wind blades of the wind wolves, giving the wind blades both the sharpness of wind blades and the freezing ability of cold air. Chapter 199. Gray's eyes lit up. If it was as he had guessed, it would be great news. The corpses of the controlled blood fiends were full of wounds, and some of their bones were even broken. As a result, their defense and combat strength were more or less weaker than when they were alive. For this reason, Gray would try his best to avoid leaving behind injuries that would affect their combat strength when hunting blood fiends. However, blood fiends were powerful and knew how to resist. They would not just stand there and let you stab them in the heart, leaving only a hole in their body. Therefore, it was inevitable that in terms of combat strength and defense, they were weaker than when they were alive. If the reverse nurturing ability could really be used on these blood fiends and heal their injuries, it would obviously be able to preserve their combat strength and defense. Moreover, since there would be battles, there would definitely be injuries. If the reverse nurturing ability could heal injuries, wouldn't that mean that as long as the blood fiends were not completely damaged, they could continue to be used? Is that so? Let's do it again. Gray's eyes lit up. After he gave the order, the other 3 blood fiends that were originally in the basement walked out of the tunnel one by one and finally arrived at the forest. With the 3 blood fiends, Gray left the area that was full of withered trees and found a lush green area. He tried to use the reverse nurturing ability in his mind. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Once again, spots of green light floated out from the surrounding trees. These green lights were like clear spring water that flowed downwards. They converged and finally wrapped around the 3 blood fiends. Under his gaze, the wounds on the 3 blood fiends healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. When the green lights disappeared, the wounds on the 3 blood fiends had disappeared without a trace. Like the jade lizard, they had returned to their previous appearances. Apart from their slightly lifeless eyes, they were no different from living blood fiends. With such blood fiends, no one would doubt that they were battle beasts. They can really be healed. Gray was pleasantly surprised. The result was very obvious. Due to the transformation ability, the reverse nurturing ability had undergone some kind of mutation. Not only could it heal itself, but it could also heal the blood fiends that were under his control. I won't have to worry so much when I fight in the future. In the past, as the battle progressed, the blood fiends would sustain more and more injuries, resulting in irreversible damage. When Gray used the blood fiends to fight, he would always be extremely careful. This made him feel like he was tiptoeing around, unable to move freely. But now, he didn't have so many misgivings. There was no need to worry about being unable to fight due to injuries. Obviously, there would be a lot less apprehension in battle. There was no doubt that the mutation of the reverse nurturing ability was extremely useful to him. I just don't know to what extent the recovery ability of reverse nurturing can reach. Gray immediately thought of another problem. Since it was a recovery ability, it must have its own limits. Can a severed limb be repaired? If his head was chopped off or damaged, could be repaired? I can give it a try. The 4 blood fiends were all mad-level blood fiends and were his precious fighting force. Naturally, he couldn't use them for such an experiment. However, this wasn't a problem for him. Although he couldn't use the 4 mad-level blood fiends, he could use other animals to try it. He only needed to temporarily remove the control over one of the mad-level blood fiends. After spending 2 days, Gray finally completed the experiment. It wasn't that he didn't want to do it in one go. After all, the reverse nurturing ability was a blood fiend ability and consumed a lot of blood force. The experiment showed that even if the limbs were chopped off, as long as they weren't severely damaged, the reverse nurturing ability could be used to repair them by putting them together. Even if the heads were chopped off, they could be repaired by putting them together. The only thing that couldn't be repaired was the damaged head. He didn't know if it was because the head was too delicate or for some other reason. Based on the results, he was extremely satisfied. Obviously, the benefits of consuming the jade lizard were huge. Just the reverse nurturing ability alone was enough for Gray to waste a chance to transform and consume this blood. Not to mention, the jade lizard's plant control ability was an extremely powerful blood fiend ability. Previously, the jade lizard was able to defeat 4 mad-level blood fiends, a ferocious blood warrior, and several ferocious blood warriors in a split second. Moreover, the jade lizard's strength, speed, and defense could be ranked among the top in the same realm. When he reached the level of a ferocious blood warrior, he didn't need to consume the blood of other blood fiends. His strength, speed, and defense were already extraordinary. Gray was in a good mood. He went to the horse farm outside the castle and rode the scarlet blood horse gifted to him by Viscount Fergus toward Fergus City. There was a good roast goose restaurant in Fergus City. After his last visit, Gray felt that the taste was pretty good and wanted to try it again. Thump, thump, thump. Behind him, there was a huge commotion. The scarlet blood horse shook its body in panic. Gray looked back and was speechless. A giant white tiger that was 5 meters long, not including its tail, was running towards him. There was a young girl on top of the giant tiger. It was Sarah. Brother. Sarah called out sweetly as she came in front of Gray. Why did you ride, little white? Gray tried his best to pacify the scarlet blood horse that was panicking after encountering the blood fiends. He looked at her speechlessly. I'm here to buy candies. It's faster to ride Little White, Sarah said matter-of-factly. Gray rolled his eyes. This was the first time someone rode a beast to buy candies. He didn't know how much pressure the owner of the candy store would feel. Because of Gray, Sarah's status in the Fergus family had been raised again and again. Now, even Viscount Fergus would not punish Sarah as long as she didn't make a big mistake out of respect for Gray. This caused the girl to be extremely arrogant. He heard that a while ago, this girl brought Hanhu to wander around the city. For some reason, they had a conflict with a noble young master and scared him to the point that he peed his pants. This was not a good sign. Gray purposely said with a serious face, "Don't do this again. If you think it's too slow, you can ride my scarlet blood horse." "I know." Sarah stuck out her tongue. Finally, Gray arrived at the roast goose shop. Under the eyes of the owner, who was about to cry, Gray enjoyed the delicious roast goose and brought Sarah back to Fergus Castle. Somewhere in the kingdom, the 4 core members of the Shadow Serpent were having a meeting. Since last year, the number of assassination missions the organization has received has decreased by a lot. Our income has decreased by a third. Do you have any suggestions to turn the situation around? On the main seat, an old man with cold eyes said with a gloomy face, "Sir, the reason for this is mainly because the assassination mission against the Sidney family failed last year. This caused the noble families to doubt the organization's assassination ability. I think that as long as we can wash away this shame, we will be able to increase the number of missions." The eye patch woman said with a sharp look in her eyes, "Wash away the shame? You are preparing to make a move against the Sidney family again?" The old man with a cold face looked at the eye patch woman. "Yes, sir." The eye patch woman's eyes were filled with cold, killing intent. In the end, the reason the organization suffered such heavy losses and was suspected of having the ability to assassinate was all because of the Fergus family. Now that half a year has passed, the Sidney family must have retreated. I am preparing to personally eliminate this family and restore the organization's reputation. I object. Hearing the eye patch woman's words, the purple-haired man frowned and objected. Since the assassination of the Sidney family last year, the organization has suffered heavy losses. Continuing to assassinate the Sidney family is not beneficial to us. We should end all operations related to the Sidney family. I think so too, the short brown-haired man said. In order to assassinate the Sidney family, the organization has lost too much power. Although we have received some rewards because of the support of the Sidney family's enemy, it is obvious that the effort is not proportional to the benefits. On the main seat, the old man with a cold face held his chin with one hand. After a moment, he put down his hand and glanced at the 3 people. The reason why the Shadow Serpent is in such a decline is indeed because of the failed assassination against the Sidney family. Continuing to target the Sidney family is indeed not beneficial to the organization's development. However, the culprit who caused all this cannot be left alive. Even if it is for the sake of the Shadow Serpent's reputation, they must be erased. Speaking of this, he looked at the eye patch woman. Chapter 200. At midnight, Gray and the others returned from the banquet hosted by Earl Ford's family. Ever since Twain Ford and his sister had personally delivered the invitation to the auction, the Fergus family and the Ford family had been interacting more frequently. "Gray, come to the study." Gray, who had spent a lot of energy dealing with the overly enthusiastic noble ladies at the banquet, was about to return to his bedroom to sleep when he was stopped by Viscount Fergus. Gray was full of doubts as he followed Viscount Fergus to the study. He wasn't sure what Viscount Fergus wanted, and why did he pick this time? "Father, what's the matter?" Gray asked directly as he sat opposite Viscount Fergus at the coffee table. Viscount Fergus also knew that Gray was very tired at the moment, so he asked without much hesitation, "What do you think of Miss Hazel?" Gray was shocked by Viscount Fergus's question for no reason. After a while, he looked at Viscount Fergus with a strange expression. "Father, could it be that Earl Ford wants to betroth Miss Hazel to me?" Hazel was the young lady who had accompanied Twain Ford to deliver the invitation to the auction. Gray had occasionally seen her at banquets in recent months. "No." Viscount Fergus shook his head. Gray heaved a sigh of relief for some reason, but the next moment, he was hammered again. but I can sense that Earl Ford has this intention. Viscount Fergus continued. If you can form a marriage alliance with the Ford family, it will be beneficial for both the Fergus family and the Ford family. Of course, this depends on your own wishes. The Fergus family doesn't need your marriage alliance to obtain benefits. It was only because of Gray that he could discuss it so nicely. If it were Bernal or Elise, he would have already made a decision. He had no choice. Gray's strength was not inferior to his, and he was the Fergus family's hope of becoming an earl's family in the future. If he were to be estranged from Gray because of a marriage alliance, the disadvantages would outweigh the advantages. What do you think? Gray pondered for a moment before replying. I'm still too young. I don't want to consider such things too early. In terms of beauty, Hazel was indeed rather beautiful. However, not all beautiful people were suitable to be wives. Gray didn't want to make a hasty decision, and he indeed didn't want to consider such matters too early. All right, Viscount Fergus nodded. Since Gray had already said so, he could only support him. While Gray and Viscount Fergus were talking in the study, 6 figures silently flipped over the walls of Fergus Castle and entered the Fergus Castle. They were shrouded in shadows as they moved forward in the shadows of the castle. The patrolling guards brushed past them 10 meters away, but they didn't discover the 6 of them at all. One of the 6 was a woman wearing an eye patch. She was one of the 3 captains of the Shadow Serpent who had the strength of a berserker. Relying on their shadow abilities, the 6 of them avoided several waves of patrolling guards and successfully entered the castle's hall. Then, they followed the stairs to the 2nd floor and groped their way to the 2nd floor. The 2nd floor was where the Fergus family's bedrooms were located. Soon, the person at the front entered the 2nd floor. He carefully looked at the 2 sides of the corridor on the 2nd floor. With his night vision, he didn't sense any signs of life. In order to prevent assassinations, some noble families would bring hunting dogs to the bedrooms at night. With their keen ears and sense of smell, they would discover assassins in advance. They had already expected such a situation and had made preparations. But now, it seemed that the Fergus family's vigilance was more lax than expected. They didn't do such a thing. He turned his head and stretched out his hand, gesturing for his companions to follow him. At this moment, in the corridor on the 2nd floor, where he hadn't discovered any signs of life, a huge creature suddenly jumped out. With a strong gust of wind, it clawed at his back. Boom! A loud sound suddenly rang out, as if something had heavily smashed against the wall and caused it to collapse. Not good. Something's happened. In the study, Gray and Viscount Fergus were shocked. They picked up the spare weapons in the study, opened the door, and ran in the direction of the sound. Because they had already experienced 2 assassinations, how could the Fergus family not be on guard? In the past, they would have placed a hunting dog in the corridor on the 2nd floor. However, after a discussion between Gray and Viscount Fergus, they replaced the hunting dog with a leopard-type blood fiend, which had a sharper sense of smell and hearing. The leopard-type blood fiend, as the corpse of a control blood fiend, naturally couldn't sense body temperature. This was also the reason why the Shadow Serpent assassin didn't discover the leopard-type blood fiend hiding in the shadows. It's an assassin, don't come out. When Gray and Viscount Fergus rushed to the staircase, they saw the leopard-type blood fiend being surrounded by 6 people dressed in black. There was a hole in the wall on the 2nd floor, which seemed to have been created by someone. Without a doubt, they had encountered an assassin. He immediately shouted to stop everyone who was about to come out of the bedroom. How could the Fergus family have a berserk-level blood fiend? The eye-patch woman was bewildered at this moment. She almost thought that she had chosen the wrong target. Originally, she thought that with her team, it would be easy to destroy the Fergus family, which only had 1 ferocious blood warrior. Unexpectedly, before the assassination began, they were ambushed and one of them was injured. What surprised her even more was that the blood fiend that suddenly ambushed them was actually a berserk-level blood fiend. A family that only had ferocious blood warriors actually had a precious berserk-level blood fiend. Logically speaking, this was almost impossible, but now it had happened. Leave 2 people behind to intercept this blood fiend with me. The other 3 go kill them. Seeing that Gray and Viscount Fergus had rushed over, she immediately ordered. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Upon hearing her order, 3 people immediately retreated from the siege and pounced toward Gray and Viscount Fergus. Facing the 3 people who pounced on them, Gray and Viscount Fergus didn't hesitate to use their wind blades. The space in the corridor was narrow, which was very suitable for the use of blood fiends. Naturally, the 2 of them wouldn't miss this opportunity. Whoosh! 2 green wind blades attacked the 3 people from the left and right. The 3 of them simultaneously dodged to the left, and without hesitation, they waved the weapons in their hands and slashed at the wind blade on the left. Whoosh! The wind blade on the right brushed past them, while the wind blade on the left collided with the sharp blades in their hands. Crack! Although the Blood Fiend's ability was powerful, it still couldn't help but shatter like glass in the face of the all-out attack of 3 ferocious blood warriors. But at that moment, a bone-chilling coldness suddenly erupted. An ice-cold frost pervaded the air, spreading towards them. Suddenly, specks of frost appeared on their bodies. Not good. The 3 people's expressions changed drastically, and they all retreated hastily. Fortunately, they weren't directly hit by the wind blades, and only some frost appeared on their bodies because of the pervasive chill. At most, their bodies would be slightly stiff, but with the physique of the Blood Warriors, they could recover in a short while. Whoosh whoosh. However, Gray and Viscount Fergus obviously wouldn't let go of this opportunity. With a burst of terrifying speed, they quickly appeared in front of the 3 people, and the weapons in their hands slashed at one of them. Clang! The person who was attacked by Gray hurriedly raised the short sword in his hand to block the attack. The result of a hasty defense, coupled with the fact that the opponent was the extremely powerful Gray, was easy to imagine. He flew backward like a cannonball. Clang! Although the person who was attacked by Viscount Fergus was slightly better than the one who was attacked by Gray, he couldn't help but retreat because of his hasty block. Viscount Fergus chased after him. As he wasn't the primary target, the 3rd person reacted. However, at this moment, Gray had already sent one of them flying. He freed his hand and slashed at the person with his sword. Clang! As the weapons collided, the person was also forced to retreat. Even though he had reacted, his body was still slightly stiff. Facing Gray, who possessed terrifying strength, he was still at a disadvantage. Whoosh! Gray appeared beside the person, holding a sword in his right hand and a dagger that was flashing with a dark green glow in his left hand. Clang! Using his sword to block the other party's weapon, Gray's dagger slashed past the other party's waist. Pooh! Blood splattered, but it wasn't red liquid anymore. The assassin's body staggered a few times before collapsing powerlessly. Green liquid also flowed out from the corner of his mouth. At this moment, the assassin who was first sent flying by Gray had already gotten up and pounced. Gray met him head-on. Pooh! Not long after Gray killed the first assassin, the assassin who was fighting with Viscount Fergus had his neck slit by Viscount Fergus's sword after being injured several times. Viscount Fergus already had the upper hand. In addition, the opponent's body was frozen stiff and his movements were immobile. Under such circumstances, there was no reason for Viscount Fergus to lose. After killing this assassin, Viscount Fergus besieged the assassin who was fighting with Gray. With the 2 of them working together, the 3rd assassin was also killed. Damn it! Although she was fighting with the leopard-type blood fiend, the woman with the eye patch still noticed the battle on the other side. When she saw that 3 of her subordinates were killed, her face turned ashen. She had completely miscalculated. Not only was there a berserk-class blood fiend, but there were also 2 ferocious blood warriors. Moreover, the leopard-type blood fiend was even stronger than her. The leopard-type blood fiend's combat strength was no different from when it was alive. Furthermore, the blood technique she cultivated was more suited for stealth and assassination. Combat wasn't her strong suit. Failed. There was no doubt that the assassination had failed. Retreat, she shouted in a low voice. She held onto the handrail and slid down, jumping from the 2nd floor to the 1st floor. Pooh! The other 2 assassins also wanted to escape like her. Chapter 201. Bang! Falling from a 2nd floor, the woman with the eye patch nimbly steadied herself like a cat falling from a great height. Whoosh! Looking at her 2 subordinates, who were stopped, She hesitated, considering whether she should turn back to save them. However, when she thought of the blood fiend, she turned around and rushed out without hesitation. That blood fiend was stronger and faster than her. If she turned back and was stopped by the blood fiend, it would be difficult for her to escape. Now that her two subordinates were holding back the blood fiend, she could buy time for her to escape. Thump, thump, thump. She rushed to the exit of the hall. Just as she was about to escape into the shadows outside, she came face to face with a rumbling sound. A 4-meter-long bull-shaped blood fiend with 2 horns on its head stomped on the ground and suddenly crashed into her. A second blood fiend at the berserk level. Her expression turned to one of shock, and cold sweat began to trickle down her forehead. With such a huge body, what else could it be but a berserk-level blood fiend? There were actually 2 berserk-level blood fiends in this small Fergus family. Whoosh! She quickly dodged to the side. Boom! The behemoth slammed into a nearby wall, creating a hole in the wall. Huff! She heaved a sigh of relief after dodging the attack. Fortunately, this blood fiend was not as fast as the previous one. Otherwise, she would have been injured if she had been hit head-on. Whoosh! She dashed out without hesitation. At this moment, the Fergus family was simply a blood fiend lair in her eyes. Whoosh! Right at this moment, a thick shadow suddenly flung towards her. She simply had no time to dodge and was already hit. Bang! She was sent flying and smashed into the ground. Her black clothes were completely torn, and there was a huge and clear bloody wound on her waist and abdomen. She felt a sharp pain in her waist and abdomen and could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. At this moment, she saw clearly what had attacked her. It was a 5-meter-long crocodile-type blood fiend covered in yellowish-brown scales. It was definitely a berserk-level blood fiend. A third berserk-level blood fiend had appeared. Could it be that he had barged into a blood fiend's lair? He had actually encountered 3 mad-class blood fiends in a row. A family with 3 berserk-level blood fiends was actually just a Viscount family? When did the Viscount family become so powerful? At this moment, she finally understood why the 4 ferocious blood warrior assassins she had sent out half a year ago had failed and why none of them had managed to escape. Not to mention 4 murderous great assassins, facing 3 berserk great blood fiends and 2 ferocious blood warriors. Even if their numbers were doubled, it would still be impossible. The woman with the eye patch was about to break down. Assassinating the Fergus family was no different from seeking death. If she had known this would happen, she would have rather assassinated the Count's family than the Fergus family. However, she was an assassin after all. Her mental fortitude was incomparable to ordinary people. She forced herself to calm down, staggered up, and ran out of the castle without hesitation. A large number of guards had already rushed over, and this gave her a chance to escape. She hid in the shadows, avoided these guards, and quickly arrived at the city wall. Her hands were like sharp claws as she dug into the solid rocks of the city wall. She climbed to the top of the city wall and then jumped down. It was pitch black outside the city wall. This was her home ground. As long as she could escape into it, she would be able to escape successfully. At this moment, she finally heaved a sigh of relief. She glanced at the castle behind her, which looked like a blood fiend's lair, with lingering fear. She prepared to escape into the shadows. Just then, she stopped abruptly. With her night vision, she could not see any living creatures in front of her. However, with the help of the slightly dim light on the castle wall, she actually saw a huge monster looking at her with a pair of huge eyes. As the light was too dim, she could not see the color of the monster's scales. However, the huge silhouette was actually bigger than the 3 berserk-level blood fiends she had seen before. The 4th berserk-level blood fiend. The 4th berserk-level blood fiend had appeared. The Fergus family actually had a 4th berserk-level blood fiend. Seeing 4 berserk-level blood fiends in a row, even someone with a strong mental fortitude like her could not help but be slightly stunned. However, the berserk-level blood fiend in front of her was not. Bang! Its huge claws suddenly pressed down, pressing her to the ground, and poking several holes in her body. She struggled to lift the claws, but found that her strength was far inferior to the other parties. She could not break free at all. Her weapon hacked at the other party's leg, leaving only shallow wounds. While she was struggling helplessly, the huge head lowered and suddenly bit down. One of her legs was bitten off, and fresh blood splattered everywhere. After a short while, Gray and Viscount Fergus finished off the two assassins. When they arrived outside the castle, there was only a mutilated corpse left. Viscount Fergus's study. Gray and Viscount Fergus returned once again. In addition to the two of them, Bernal was also there. An assassin with the strength of a berserk warrior? Gray, are you sure you didn't make a mistake? Bernal looked at Gray with a pale face. Due to his lack of strength, he had stayed in the bedroom until the battle was completely over. Only then did he come out of the bedroom. When he suddenly heard Gray say that there was a berserk warrior among the assassins, he could not help but be greatly shocked, and his mind went blank. Berserk warriors, if placed in the Sydney Marquis Dome, had the possibility of becoming a Count's family. Although not all of them could become a Count's family with the strength of a berserk warrior, there was no doubt that there was already such a possibility. And such an existence was actually sent by the Shadow Serpent to assassinate the Fergus family? If this was really the case, it was not difficult to imagine the Shadow Serpent's desire to kill the Fergus family. There's no mistake. The strength of a leopard-type blood fiend is not inferior to a berserk warrior. To be able to contend against it, this person must be a berserk warrior. Understanding Bernal's worries, Gray's expression turned slightly serious, and he nodded affirmatively. There shouldn't be a mistake. Judging from this person's appearance, he should be one of the 3 captains of the Shadow Serpent that young Master Zaloyan once mentioned. Viscount Fergus said in a deep voice. They even sent out a captain-level character. The Shadow Serpent really thinks highly of our Fergus family. Bernal smiled bitterly. Indeed, this time, if not for Gray possessing that magic weapon, the Fergus family would definitely have been finished. Viscount Fergus also had a lingering fear in his heart. Father, then what do we do now? Should we report this matter to the Sydney family and ask for the Sydney family support? Bernal's face was filled with anxiety. Being targeted by an assassination organization that had once been the enemy of the Sydney family, but had not been destroyed, his heart was filled with anxiety and fear. No, it's best to conceal this matter. Viscount Fergus pondered for a moment, and then shook his head. A magic weapon that can control berserk blood fiends is of great importance. Although with my understanding of the Sydney family, they should not go so far as to snatch it, it's still better to be cautious. Then what about the Shadow Serpent? Bernal was anxious. Viscount Fergus shook his head slightly, looked at Gray, and asked, Gray, what do you think? I agree with Father's point of view. We should conceal this matter. Although according to common sense, the Sydney family should not snatch the magic weapon, we should still be careful. Gray naturally agreed. After all, he could not take out such a magic weapon. If the Sydney family wanted to see it, they would be terrible. As for the Shadow Serpent, after the last and this time's losses, I think they should not make a move against the Fergus family in the short term. Speaking until here, Gray paused slightly. Moreover, the 4 blood fiends I control are all berserk blood fiends. Even if 2 ordinary berserkers come, I have the confidence to contend against them. That's good. Hearing Gray say that he could contend against 2 berserkers, Viscount Fergus and Bernal heaved a sigh of relief. According to the Sydney family's information, the Shadow Serpent only had 3 captain-level characters. Now that one of them had died, even if there were more assassins, there should not be more than 2. It was still within the range of being able to deal with them. As for the barbarian blood warriors, the 2 subconsciously did not think about it. Putting aside whether the Shadow Serpent existed for the time being, if such a thing really happened, it would be the same whether they reported it to the Sydney family or not. The Sydney family would not send a barbarian blood warrior to oversee the Fergus family. Okay, it's decided. Viscount Fergus made a decision. Everyone is tired today. Go and rest first. Chapter 202. Somewhere in the kingdom. The old man with malicious eyes was sitting in the main seat. His face was so gloomy that it could drip water. After a good while, he opened his mouth and said, Leona is dead. What? Hearing his words, The purple-haired man stood up in surprise. The short brown-haired man was also shocked. Leona, with the strength of a berserker, was dead? How could this be? Even when facing the encirclement and suppression of the Sydney family last time, there was no loss of berserker. This time, assassinating a small Viscount family, they actually lost a berserker? When Leona took the assassination mission, they didn't think about the possibility of the mission failing. However, even if the assassination failed, in their view, with Leona's strength, she should be able to escape. This was also the reason why they didn't worry about Leona going to the assassination. But now they actually heard that Leona was dead. Their first reaction was disbelief. Sir, could it be that the news is wrong? The short brown-haired man's eyes widened. He didn't believe it or didn't want to believe it. Assassinating a small Viscount family. How could a berserker be killed? This was really too unbelievable. He was more willing to believe that Leona was temporarily unable to contact the organization for some reason. It has been confirmed many times. It can't be wrong. The old man shook his head. His face was extremely ugly. It was not only the two who didn't want to believe it. Even when he first heard the news, he also thought that the news was wrong. After repeatedly confirming it, he had to believe it. Leona, with the strength of a berserker, was dead. Not only her, but the assassins with her also couldn't escape. How could this be? Could it be that they were ambushed by the Sydney family? The purple-haired man's face was full of surprise. But how could this be? Half a year has passed. How could the Sydney family not withdraw? This matter is indeed strange. However, this is the only explanation that makes sense. The old man said with a gloomy face. Whether it was him, the purple-haired man, or the short brown-haired man, they never thought that this was the power of the Fergus family. It was really too hard to believe. Killing a berserker was something that even a count's family would find difficult to accomplish. As for a viscount's family, they definitely wouldn't believe it. From today onwards, all members of the Shadow Serpent are not allowed to step into Sidourney Hill, nor are they allowed to accept assassination commissions related to Sidourney Hill. After a long while, the old man with a malicious expression made a decision and gave the order in a deep voice. Yes, the purple-haired man and the short brown-haired man both nodded in agreement. From the beginning to the end, neither of them mentioned anything about avenging the eye-patch woman, Leona. On the one hand, they did not have the ability to do so. On the other hand, they did not have a close relationship with the eye-patch girl, Leona. Assassins were cold people, and they were more wary of each other. They didn't have much friendship with the woman with the eye patch, so naturally, they wouldn't put themselves in danger for the woman with the eye patch. 1 month later, in Fergus Castle, as expected, the assassination of the Shadow Serpent did not come. Instead, another matter caught them off guard. The Herbs were robbed, and Lord Corgi was killed. Hearing this news, Gray was stunned at first. Then a cold, murderous intent suddenly appeared in his eyes. Lord Corgi was a person that Gray had met a few times. When Gray was passing through Marquis Oka from Sidourney City, he had taken a ride on the Fergus family's caravan that was transporting herbs. He was a person that was easy to get along with, and he had given all the money he had collected from the robbers to Gray. To a certain extent, Gray owed him a favor. Yet, such a person was already dead. Moreover, he was killed by the robbers. This made him furious. How could this be? Bernal's face was also filled with surprise and anger. Lord Corgi had the strength of an upper-level blood warrior. Could it be that more than 2 upper-level blood warriors joined forces? Or perhaps a murderous blood warrior was involved? I don't know. All the guards were killed, and there were no survivors. Viscount Fergus shook his head with an ugly expression. Father, there are more than 2 upper-level blood warriors, or perhaps a murderous blood warrior. Such a bandit group is rare in Sidourney. Could it be a noble force in disguise? Bernal was bewildered. It was common for nobles to disguise themselves as bandits and make huge profits without any capital. Based on the current situation, this possibility was very high. No matter if it is a bandit or a noble force in disguise, they must pay the price. Viscount Fergus's eyes were cold. Gray, I hope you could go and find the bandits or forces. No matter what, don't hold back and kill them all. But I'm not good at tracking. Gray frowned slightly. The abilities that he had were not good at tracking, and he had not specifically learned how to track. If he found the culprit, it would not be a problem for him to act, but tracking was a little difficult for him. Viscount Fergus seemed to have thought of this long ago, so he said immediately, "Don't worry about that. I'll let Baron Harry, who is good at tracking, follow you. You just need to act last. Then it's no problem." Gray nodded. Since he was only responsible for acting last, of course, there was no problem. This bandit might have a murderous blood warrior. Bring the leopard blood beast with you. Viscount Fergus continued. Okay. Gray nodded. Out of the 4 blood beasts, the leopard blood beast was the easiest to take. As for the other 3 blood beasts, they were too big and would cause too much noise. The next morning, Gray rode away from the Fergus family with a short and fat man and a few guards. The short and fat man was Lord Harry that Viscount Fergus mentioned yesterday. Other than that, there was also a leopard blood beast following behind them. This was their final trump card. If Gray could take care of it, then it would be the best. If even Gray couldn't do it, then they would have to use it. They didn't bring too many people. If Gray and the leopard blood beast couldn't do it together, then it would be useless no matter how many people they brought. The guards they brought were only responsible for logistics and sending messages. Tap, tap, tap. Considering the leopard blood beast, Gray chose to travel on a secluded path. Although Lord Harry was confused about why Gray did this, he didn't ask. They stayed in a village for the night. A day later, Gray and the others arrived at the place where the caravan was killed. The bodies of the guards had been cleaned up, but there were still traces of a battle. There were dried blood stains, arrows that had fallen to the ground, pieces of leather armor that had been hacked off, and even broken weapons. All signs pointed to the fact that a brutal battle had taken place here. Lord Harley, please track the whereabouts of the robbers and see if you can find them. Green looked at Lord Harry and said, Yes, young Master Gray. Lord Harry replied and dismounted from his horse. His attitude was very respectful. Although Viscount Fergus hadn't announced it in public, how could he not guess that Gray had been selected as the successor of the Fergus family? Therefore, he was very polite when facing Gray. Besides, Gray was an upper-level blood warrior. He was even stronger than him now. He couldn't help but be polite. Under Gray's watchful gaze, Lord Harry began to search the vicinity. He either squatted down to observe the footprints or reached out to touch the tire marks. After a while, he stood up with a frown. Lord Harry, how is it? Seeing that the other party seemed to have come to a conclusion, Gray asked. When the bandit retreated, they cleaned up their tracks. However, they left with several carriages carrying herbs. Some of the tracks couldn't be completely cleaned up. I could try to follow them. That's good. Gray let out a sigh of relief. It was good that they could follow. He was afraid that they couldn't. He didn't know what kind of force robbed the Fergus family's caravan, but he didn't care. With his strength and the leopard-type blood fiend hiding in the dark, he was confident that as long as he could find them, he would be able to destroy them. What he was afraid of was that he couldn't track them down. Even if he had the strength, there was nothing he could do. He finally saw where his weakness was. He hoped that he would have the chance to meet a blood fiend with tracking abilities in the future. The few of them walked and followed the tracks. A day later, a city appeared in front of them. The city walls were more than 10 meters high. The huge city gate was completely made of metal. It was majestic. Although it was slightly smaller than Sydney City in terms of scale, it should still be a city with a permanent population of more than 100,000. Chapter 203. Smalley City. Looking at the city in front of him, Gray frowned. He didn't expect the Herbs to enter Smalley City in the end. Smalley City, in the Sydney territory, was one of the 2 Earl families, the Smalley family. He didn't suspect that the Fergus family's Herbs were robbed by the Smalley family. As a big city with a population of more than 100,000, Smalley City was bustling with commerce and people. It was very suitable for dealing with large amounts of herbs. It was normal for the robbers to transport them here and sell them through the channels here. It might not be related to the Smalley family, or it might even be unrelated. No one would be stupid enough to bring back the things they robbed to their own territory to deal with. Young Master Gray, what do we do now? Lord Harry looked at Gray awkwardly. Although he was good at tracking, it was only to a certain extent. Now that the herds had been transported into Smalley City, even he couldn't do anything. After all, there were so many carriages going in and out of Smalley City every day. Even if there were any clues, it would be suppressed. Let's settle down in the hotel in the city first. Then you come with me to visit the Smalley family. There is no good way, so Gray could only see if he could get some useful information from the Smalley family. As the ruler of Smalley City, the Smalley family's information network was naturally very powerful. Perhaps he could get some information from them about which shops in the city had large amounts of herbs coming in and out in the past few days. After settling down in the hotel in the city, Gray specially washed up. He put on his noble clothes and brought Lord Harry to Smalley Castle. After showing his identity, Gray and Lord Harry were led to a living room. Then, after a full hour, other than the servants coming up to serve tea, there was no one else. Gray and Lord Harry's face changed from the initial expectation to a strange expression, then to confusion, and finally to green. If they still didn't understand that the Smalley family had put them on the cold bench, then there was something wrong with their IQ. Even if Count Smalley was delayed by something or was not here, there should be someone else coming to greet them, right? But after a full hour, there was not even a single person coming to greet them. No matter which family it was, this was definitely not right. What was going on? What did the Fergus family do to offend the Smalley family? Gray was confused. The Fergus family and Smalley family were too far apart. Their territories were not adjacent, so they rarely met each other. Although there was almost no interaction, it was impossible for them to become enemies. But why was the Smalley family's families? Could it be because the Smalley family's back garden? Count Smalley and the next successor of the Smalley family, Winston Smalley, were seated in a pavilion, leisurely drinking tea. A man dressed as a servant walked over. Winston Smalley, who had a head of slightly long brown hair and a handsome face, looked at the man and asked, "How is it? Have they left?" "Not yet. The Smalley Fergus clan." The corners of Winston Smalley's lips curled up into a cold smile. "What a joke. They're so close to the Ford family, and now they dare to visit my Smalley family." The Smalley family naturally had their reasons for treating the Fergus family coldly. The reason was that the Fergus family and the Ford family had been too close in the past few months. There was even news of a marriage alliance. The Ford family and the Smalley family were the two families second only to the Sidney family in the Marquis of Sidney's territory. There was no lack of conflict between the two families. The Fergus family and the Ford family were too close. This naturally caused the Smalley family to be extremely displeased. As a descendant of the Fergus family, Gray came to visit the Smalley family. The Smalley family naturally wouldn't be nice to Gray. Since the Fergus family and the Ford family were already together, they naturally wouldn't mind becoming enemies with the Fergus family. Moreover, with the Smalley family's background, why would they care about becoming enemies with the Fergus family? Not to mention that the Fergus family wasn't confirmed yet. Things that weren't confirmed could change at any time. Even if the Fergus family became a Count family, the Smalley family wouldn't be afraid of the Fergus family, given their many years of history as a Count family. Whatever. Send them away. Just say that I'm outside patrolling the territory and not in the castle. Count Smalley furrowed his brows and waved his hand to signal his servants. If the Fergus family wasn't so close to the Ford family, he might be interested in meeting this genius whose name had spread throughout the Sidney territory. But now, he wasn't interested in meeting him at all. He had heard about the Fergus family's herbs being robbed. According to his estimation, this Gray Fergus came to visit because he needed something from the Smalley family. That was even more reason to not meet him. "Yes, master." The servant obeyed and left. "Young Master Gray, the Smalley family has gone too far," Lord Harry said with a pale face as he walked out of the Smalley castle. Gray's face was also gloomy as he tried to suppress the anger in his heart. Ever since he came to this world, this was the first time he was treated like a cold bench. "Let's go back first," Gray said with a frown. The Fergus family and the Smalley family didn't have any grudges, so the reason should be because of the Fergus family's recent interactions with the Ford family. Before he came, it wasn't that he didn't think that this would cause waves, but he quickly dismissed this thought. The Fergus family and the Ford family did have interactions, but that was only between nobles. They didn't have any intention of forming an alliance. At least, that was what he knew. But obviously, the Smalley family didn't think so. They probably thought that the Fergus family had completely sided with the Ford family between the Smalley family and the Ford family. However, he didn't have any intention of explaining this. His current strength wasn't any weaker than the Smalley family, so he couldn't lower himself to explain to the Smalley family. Plus, the Smalley family didn't give him a chance to explain. From the beginning to the end, he didn't even see Count Smalley. After returning to the hotel, Gray asked one of the guards to report the situation and called Lord Harry to the room for a discussion. We can't count on the Smalley family anymore. If we want to get information, we can only rely on ourselves. Lord Harry, do you have any good suggestions? Gray said with a frown. Lord Harry frowned and said after thinking for a moment, Young Master Gray, there's a method we can try. What method? Ask the mercenaries in this city to help us investigate. They're the local tyrant of Smalley City, so they must be very well informed. They must have a way to get information. Mercenaries? Gray's eyes were the same. Indeed, mercenaries mixed in with the civilians, so they were very well informed. Since the Smalley family didn't work, asking the local mercenaries to help was a good choice. Thinking up to this point, Gray called the hotel clerk over and threw out a few silver coins. The clerk's eyes began to sparkle. He led them out of the hotel and into the old area of the city. After a few turns, they arrived in front of a slightly old house. Who is it? Two men in leather armor were leaning against the door. When they saw Gray and the other two arrive, the two men lazily stood up and suspiciously sized up the three of them. I want to issue a mission. Gray waved his hand to signal the hotel clerk to leave and said. The two of them scanned Gray and then looked at Lord Harry behind Gray. They looked at each other, and one of them waved his hand and said, You guys follow me. After entering the door, they entered a place that looked like a yard. In the yard, there were about 20 men dressed like mercenaries. They were carrying sandbags and a giant piece of wood to train their bodies. Without the blood technique, the only way for ordinary people to become stronger was to temper their bodies through the process of being pressured to achieve their goal. Captain, they want to issue a mission. The tall, skinny man brought Gray and the other two to a man with bare arms and sweat all over his head. The man wiped his sweat with a towel and led Gray and the other two into an extremely simple living room. What mission do you want to issue? The man with bare arms asked after asking someone to serve tea to Gray and the Lord Harry. He then looked at Gray. Although Gray was the younger one between the two, he could tell that Gray was the one in charge from the way they were dressed. As a leader of a mercenary team, he could tell that Gray was the one in charge. Just a few days ago, our merchant team's herbs were robbed. After tracking them, we found out that they were sent to Smalley City. I want to ask your mercenary team to investigate the whereabouts of these herbs and find out which force handled them. Gray said, the whereabouts of a large amount of herbs and the force that handled them. The man with bare arms frowned. After thinking for a while, he gritted his teeth and said, Our mercenary team can accept this mission, but it's very difficult and dangerous to investigate the force that handled them. You might even lose your life at any time, so the price will be very high. You also need to pay half of the reward in advance. How much? Gray asked directly. The difficulty of the investigation was high, and there was a chance of losing their life. After all, the other party was a force that could kill an upper-level blood warrior. 100 gold coins. Sure, but I hope it's as soon as possible. Great in bargain. To him, 100 gold coins was nothing. Plus, this mission was very dangerous. No problem. Chapter 204. A few days later, the mercenary team's investigation came to an end. The results of the investigation were delivered to Gray in the form of a letter. Gray opened the letter and looked at it. After a while, he put it away with an ugly expression. Young Master Gray, where are the herbs now? Seeing Gray's ugly expression, Lord Harry asked in confusion. A herb shop secretly opened by the Valentine family in Smalley City. Gray replied, The Valentine family? What family is that? Lord Harry raised his eyebrows. He had never heard of this family before. This is a Viscount family in theft by the Smalley family. Gray explained. A Viscount family in theft by the Smalley family? Young Master Gray, could it be that those robbers? Yes, the ones who transported the herbs were the Valentine family. If I'm not wrong, those robbers should be the Valentine family in disguise. Gray nodded and confirmed Lord Harry's guess. The robbers were the Valentine family in disguise. Lord Harry's face was shocked at first, then it turned into worry. Young Master Gray, with the current relationship between the Fergus family and the Smalley family, if you want to get back these herbs, I'm afraid, since the Valentine family was a Viscount family, they naturally wouldn't be weak. Even if they weren't as strong as the Fergus family, they wouldn't be too far off. The best way to get back the herbs from such a family was to force the Valentine family to hand them over through the Smalley family. But now that the relationship between the Fergus family and the Smalley family was very stiff, it was obviously impossible to get the herbs back through the Smalley family. If you can't get it back, just take it back, Gray said with a cold gaze. If the Smalley family had treated him politely the last time he visited them, he would have communicated with the Smalley family and let the Valentine family take the initiative to hand over the medicinal ingredients and let the Valentine family compensate for it. As for now, since the Smalley family was being so rude to him, there was no need for him to be polite to the Smalley family. He would snatch the herbs back first and deal with the Valentine family later. With his side in the right, Gray wasn't afraid even if Marquis Sidney was informed. But this way, our relationship with the Smalley family will become even more. Young Master Gray, why don't we go back and discuss this with the Viscount first? Lord Harry had a worried look on his face. It's too late. Gray shook his head. By the time we finish our discussion, this batch of medicinal herbs might have already been sold by the Valentine family. Also, before I came here, my father told me that no matter who stole the Fergus family's medicinal herbs, we must not let them go. Lord Harry opened his mouth. He wanted to say something, but he didn't. Indeed, it would be too late by the time the Valentine family sold these herbs. After spending a silver coin and finding a guide, Gray and the others soon arrived in front of a pharmacy. The scale of the pharmacy was not small. It was no wonder that they would transport the herbs here. With the scale of his pharmacy, it was indeed easy to sell the herbs. Do it, Gray ordered the guards who followed him. What do you want? Ah, a servant of the pharmacy came forward and shouted at the guards who had rushed into the pharmacy. But in the next moment, a bright blade appeared and slashed at his neck. He screamed and fell to the ground. Ah! The people who were buying herbs in the pharmacy all screamed and ran away. The guards ignored these people. They only looked for the people in the pharmacy and killed whoever they saw. Who dares to make trouble here? In the backyard of the pharmacy, a man rushed out aggressively. When he saw the dead pharmacy servant, his face was full of murderous intent. He was a middle-level blood warrior and was the one who stayed here to guard the batch of herbs. He didn't expect that the pharmacy would encounter such a thing. Go to hell, he roared, pulled out his blade, and rushed angrily at one of the guards. Puff! However, in the next moment, blood blossomed from his neck, and bright red blood sprayed everywhere. He covered his neck with his hand and fell down with a terrified look in his eyes. Behind him, Gray swung the sword in his hand. Other than Lord Harry, the guards who came with him were all normal soldiers who had never practiced blood spells. They could deal with normal people, but they couldn't deal with blood warriors. Naturally, they couldn't let this guy attack them. Lord Harry, who had pulled out his weapon halfway, looked at Gray in shock and put it back. Seeing the man pounce at the guard, he was prepared to make a move, but he did not expect Gray to act so quickly and kill the man in one move. It looked like the rumor that this young master was already an upper-level blood warrior was true. Young Master Gray, I found the herbs. Not long after, a guard came up to report. Gray went to check and saw a pile of herbs in wooden boxes in the warehouse behind the pharmacy. There was even the symbol of the Fergus family on the wooden boxes. It was the batch of herbs that the Fergus family robbed. Put the herbs on the carriage. There were many carriages in the backyard of the pharmacy. They were the ones used to transport the herbs here. Gray let the guards use them. Who dares to cause trouble in Smalley? A group of Smalley City guards who heard about the incident rushed over. The Viscount family is the Fergus family. Gray walked up and said coldly. The Viscount family is the Fergus family? The leader of this group of city guards was a middle-aged man. When he heard Gray's words, he couldn't help but show hesitation. He had heard of the Viscount Fergus family before. If he attacked them, he wouldn't be able to get anything out of it. But if he didn't do anything, it would be troublesome if he investigated later. After thinking for a while, he immediately called one of his men to report to Smalley Castle. Gray saw the other party's action but didn't stop him. There was a legitimate reason to attack the pharmacy, but attacking city guards was inexcusable. Since he dared to attack, he naturally wasn't afraid of the Smalley family finding out. Since he had already shed all pretense of cordiality, he wouldn't mind offending the Smalley family. When all the herbs, including the original ones in the pharmacy, were loaded onto the carriages, a group of dozens of people rode over aggressively. The leader was a young man with brown hair. It was Vincent Smalley. When he saw Gray standing in front of the pharmacy, he immediately snorted. "Gray Fergus, you sure have guts. You actually dare to kill people in Smalley City." "I didn't casually kill people. The ones I killed were the robbers who robbed the Fergus family of their herbs." Gray looked at the other party and said indifferently, "Robbers are robbers just because you say so." Vincent Smalley sneered. "These medicine boxes have the symbol of the Fergus family. If you don't believe me, you could go take a look yourself." Gray said, "Go take a look." "Young master, there's indeed the symbol of the Fergus family." Vincent Smalley signaled for one of his subordinates to go take a look. Not long later, he received an affirmative reply from this subordinate. "Gray Fergus, this can at most prove that these people are related to the robbers. Moreover, this is Smalley City after all. You didn't even greet us. Aren't you looking down on the Smalley family too much?" The coldness in Vincent Smalley's eyes didn't disappear because of this. "Please come to our Smalley family as a guest for a period of time. I'll send someone to get Viscount Fergus to pick you up. When the time comes, I'll ask Viscount Fergus how the Fergus family teaches their children. I still have things to do, so I won't be visiting your Smalley family as a guest. How the Fergus family teaches their children is none of your business." Gray said with a cold face. "That's not up to you." Vincent Smalley's eyes emitted coldness. He dashed out, wearing a pair of metal gloves on each of his hands as he pounced toward Gray. Ding! Gray pulled out his sword and swept it out. The sword and the gloves clashed, sending sparks flying. Then a figure kept on backing off. It was Vincent Smalley. Ding, ding, ding. Since he had already made his move, and it was the other party who had made the first move, Gray naturally wouldn't stop here. Taking a step forward, he was like a gust of wind blowing past, catching up to Vincent Smalley. The sword in his hand flashed with blue light. After a few consecutive sword attacks, Vincent Smalley's fists were slapped away and his neck was held against a longsword. "Let go of our young master." Seeing that their young master had been captured, the Smalley family's guards in the surroundings wore worried expressions. They all came up and surrounded Gray with murderous intents. Lord Harry and the others were worried, but they were also surrounded. Throwing a glance at Vincent Smalley, who had a grim countenance with his sword against his neck, Gray's lips curled up into a hint of ridicule. "It seems that I can still make the decision. Don't you think so, young Master Vincent Smalley?" Then, ignoring Vincent Smalley's grim countenance, he sheathed his sword, turned around, and walked out. The Smalley family's guards who had surrounded him hesitated for a moment, but eventually made way. Their young master was fine, and the other party was clearly not to be trifled with. Vincent Smalley's countenance was grim. Losing to Gray had put him in a bad mood. Although he could make use of his advantage in numbers to force Gray to stay, that would only make him more embarrassed. "Let's go." With a grim countenance, he threw a glance at Gray, then left with the Smalley family's guards. After Gray packed up all the medicinal herbs and money from medicine shop, he also left Smalley City. This time around, he had definitely offended the Smalley family. However, this was within his expectations. Moreover, the Smalley family was the one who had made things difficult for him in the first place. The only thing that surprised him was that the Smalley family didn't force him to stay. He had already summoned the leopard-type blood fiend outside Smalley City. The moment the Smalley family prepared to do so, he would immediately let the leopard-type blood fiend charge into the city. Chapter 205. After leaving Smalley City, Gray did not return to the Fergus family straight away. Instead, he sent someone back to report back to the Sydney family. Afterward, he took the herbs to Sydney City and handed them over to the Sydney family's pharmacy. Afterward, he left Lord Harry and the others behind and went back the same way he came. He passed by Smalley City, but he did not enter. Instead, he went around Smalley City and arrived at the Valentine family's territory. As the culprit behind this, Gray would not let the Valentine family go. Young Master Gray. When he arrived, a few dozen people walked out of the forest and met up with him. It was the hidden force of the Fergus family led by Edge. When Gray sent someone back to report, he also asked Viscount Fergus to bring them here. "Long time no see, Lord Edge." Gray smiled and greeted. The leopard-type blood beast followed beside him. If he wanted to destroy the Valentine family, the leopard-type blood beast's power was essential. Therefore, he did not hide it. Also, as the hidden force of the Fergus family, these people were the most loyal group of people in the Fergus family. It was not a big deal to let them know about the leopard-type blood beast. Blood beast. Seeing the leopard-type blood beast beside Gray, Edge and the others were shocked. They did not expect the Fergus family to have another blood beast other than Han Hu. Due to its reverse nurturing ability, there were no visible injuries on the leopard-type blood fiend's body. Other than its slightly lifeless eyes, it was not much different from a normal blood fiend. As a result, they could not even tell that it was a dead blood fiend. Although the leopard-type blood beast was quite long, they did not think that it was a mad blood beast. It was too crazy. Gray did not want to explain. Instead, he led these people towards the Valentine family. Valentine's castle. "Father, that pharmacy is the property of our Valentine family. I'm afraid that the Fergus family already knows that the herbs were stolen by our Valentine family." A middle-aged man frowned. "It doesn't matter. So what if they know?" An old man sneered. "We are both Viscount families, but our Valentine family is not inferior to the Fergus family. Even if they know, they can't do anything to our Valentine family. But what if the Fergus family asks Count Smalley to punish us and ask for compensation?" The middle-aged man was still worried. "You don't have to worry about that. I heard that Count Smalley doesn't have a good impression of the Fergus family. The direct descendants of the Fergus family have even clashed with young Master Vincent before. If the Fergus family wants to seek justice from Count Smalley, he definitely won't care." The old man shook his head with a relaxed expression. "But after this, we have to be careful of our own caravans. The Fergus family can't take revenge on us, but they might take revenge on our caravans. I know. I'll be more vigilant." The middle-aged man nodded. "Not good, there are blood fiends." At this moment, a guard cried out in horror. "What happened?" The middle-aged man and the old man were both shocked. They rushed out of the room and went outside. It was a mess outside. A 3-meter-long leopard-type blood fiend was wreaking havoc in the castle like a yellow phantom. Under its sharp claws, the castle guards were easily killed. The attacks of the castle guards couldn't even touch its body. Wind-chasing leopard. No, this is a berserk blood fiend, Windrider leopard. Damn it, why is there a berserk blood fiend? The old man panicked. Upon hearing his words, the middle-aged man's face instantly turned pale, to the point where there was no trace of blood. A berserk blood fiend actually appeared in the castle. He was stunned. This wasn't something they could fight against. "I wonder which one of you is Viscount Valentine." At this moment, a voice rang out. The two of them jumped in fright and turned their heads to look. Only then did they discover that not far away from them, a young man was standing there, looking at them with interest. "Who are you? You brought that Windrider leopard here? What feud does the Valentine family have with you?" The two men looked at the young man in front of them with fear. Although the young man in front of them was very young, being able to bring along a berserk blood fiend meant that he was extremely dangerous, no matter how young he was. "I'm a member of the Fergus family." Looking at the two of them, Gray had a cold smile on his face. "What feud do you think I have with you?" "What? A member of the Fergus family? No, that's impossible. How could the Fergus family afford a berserk blood fiend?" The two men couldn't believe their ears. The Fergus family was just a Viscount family like them. Although they were infected by the Sydney family and had a stronger family background, it wasn't by much. How could such a family afford to have a berserk blood fiend? I don't care if you believe me or not. Since you dared to attack the Fergus family, you must pay the price." Gray shrugged. If the two men didn't believe him, there was nothing he could do. Besides, he didn't care whether they believed him or not. What do you want?" The two men looked at Gray in fear. "Isn't it clear? Of course, I want to destroy the Valentine family." Gray revealed his white teeth. "No, you can't do this. We are nobles and theft by the Smalley family. If you treat us like this, the Smalley family won't let you go." The middle-aged man cried out in panic. "Then we'll see if the Smalley family has the ability to do so." Gray laughed disdainfully. Even now, they still wanted to use the Smalley family to scare him. Wasn't that a little too foolish? Unlike the panicked middle-aged man, the old man's heart was cold and his forehead was covered in cold sweat. The Fergus family had a berserk blood fiend. Even if they weren't as strong as the Smalley family, they weren't too far off. The Smalley family couldn't do anything to them. No, there's still a chance. Looking at Gray, a trace of ruthlessness flashed across his eyes. He made up his mind, pulled out the knife at his waist, and pounced on Gray. As long as he could kidnap this young man, he would be able to stop the berserk blood fiend. Swish! Looking at the old man pouncing on him, Gray's lips curled into a playful smile. He pulled out his sword and slashed. Clang! A loud sound was heard. Both the old man and Gray couldn't help but back away. Their strength wasn't too different. The blood technique practiced by the Valentine family should be strength. Ferocious blood warrior? You are a ferocious blood warrior? After stabilizing himself, the old man looked at Gray in shock. His opponent was so young, but he was already a ferocious blood warrior. How could this be? Ferocious blood warrior? How is this possible? On the other hand, the middle-aged man was in a daze. Even he was only an upper-level blood warrior. His opponent was already a ferocious blood warrior. "Oomph," Gray snorted. Ignoring the old man's surprise, he pounced on him. "Father, let me help you." The middle-aged man pulled out his weapon and attacked Gray from all sides. Clang, clang, clang. However, facing the attacks of the old man and the middle-aged man, Gray was still calm. With his speed, he easily blocked their attacks. After exchanging a few blows, Gray forced the old man back with one strike. Then, he turned around and slashed at the middle-aged man who was attacking him from the side. The middle-aged man was cut into two at the waist. Fei Qi. Seeing the middle-aged man killed, the old man's eyes widened. With a roar, the surrounding weeds suddenly swelled and turned into sharp swords that pierced toward Gray. Plant ability? Gray's face revealed a strange expression. The Blood Fiend's ability was actually a plant ability. His heart skipped a beat. In the next moment, the sharp swords that were piercing toward him suddenly turned around and stabbed toward the old man. Before the old man could even react, he had been pierced by the sharp swords, and more than 10 bloody holes appeared on his body. How could this be? The old man was stunned. He couldn't believe it. The plants that he controlled had turned around and attacked him. What was going on? How could this be? Then, the light in his eyes slowly dimmed. However, his body didn't fall. The plants that had turned into sharp swords were supporting him. Gray walked over and cut off the weeds that were supporting him. This was to prevent others from seeing that the old man was killed by plants. The reason why the weeds turned around and attacked the old man was that he had also used his plant ability. Moreover, the plant ability that Gray obtained from the Jade Lizard was obviously stronger than the old man's plant ability. Therefore, the plants that were originally under the old man's control were now attacking the old man under Gray's control. Young Master Gray, everyone in the castle has been killed. The castle's secret room has also been found. After waiting for about 10 minutes, Eddie came to report to Gray. Okay. Glenn nodded and followed Eddie to the castle's secret room. The reason why he summoned Eddie and the others was not that he and the leopard blood fiend couldn't deal with the Valentine family, but to prevent any fish from escaping the net. After entering the secret room, Gray found that the Valentine family was extraordinarily poor. Including gold coins and magic coins, they only had about 200,000 gold coins. In addition, there were some weapons and other things, but they were all things that Gray didn't care about. Chapter 206. Smalley Castle. The Smalley family was having their meal in the dining hall when a servant suddenly rushed in. panting heavily. Count Smalley furrowed his brows, a look of displeasure on his face. "What's the matter, Master Valentine? Valentine's family has been annihilated. What? How is this possible?" Before Count Smalley could say anything, Vincent Smalley had already exclaimed and looked at the servant who reported the news in shock. The Valentine's family was a Viscount family in theft by the Smalley family. The family had fierce blood warriors in charge. How could such a family be annihilated? Is the news reliable? Young Master Vincent, the news was brought by a noble of the Valentine's family, and the other party is now in the castle. There can't be any mistake. The servant panted. Knowing that this was a serious matter, he hurried over to report as soon as he received the news. How can this be? Vincent Smalley was shocked. Count Smalley had already stood up and walked to the living room. Vincent Smalley also hurriedly stood up and followed. When they came to the living room, the two saw the messenger. It was a large middle-aged man. The two had an impression of this person. He had once followed Viscount Valentine to visit the Smalley family. He was a baron in theft by the Valentine's family. "Tell me clearly what happened," Count Smalley said in a deep voice. "Yes, Lord Count." The large middle-aged man hurriedly nodded, but his face was extremely pale. His family was in theft by the Valentine's family. Now that the Valentine's family had been annihilated, his territory would be taken back if there were no accidents. The efforts of several generations had ended in his generation. One could imagine how he felt now. They were all killed and their bodies were burned. Not a single person escaped. Could it be the Shadow Serpent? Winston Smalley wore a look of shock. To annihilate a Viscount family without a single person escaping, the strength required was definitely not something an ordinary force could do. He immediately thought of the Shadow Serpent, an assassin organization that had continuously committed genocide in Marquis Sidney's territory. That's not right. Why would the Shadow Serpent attack the Valentine's family? However, he was immediately puzzled. Even if the Shadow Serpent wanted to take revenge on the nobles of Marquis Sidney, they wouldn't have chosen the Valentine family under normal circumstances. The Fergus family. At this moment, a voice sounded. After hearing the report of the burly middle-aged man, Count Smalley, who had been silent all this while, raised his head and said coldly, "Fergus family?" Winston Smalley didn't know why his father would suddenly bring up this family he loathed the most. Being defeated by Grey was a humiliation to him, causing him to not wish to hear anything about Fergus. However, he immediately reacted and understood why his father had mentioned the name of the family. "Father, do you suspect that the Fergus family did it?" Winston Smalley looked at his father in surprise, unsure of the basis for his father's judgment. "Yes." Count Smalley nodded. "Last time, when the Fergus family's medicinal herbs were robbed, I had someone investigate. That pharmacy was opened by the Valentine family." Opened by the Valentine family? In other words, the Fergus family's medicinal herbs were robbed by the Valentine family? That's why the Fergus family acted against the Valentine family? Winston Smalley furrowed his brows. "But father, with the Fergus family's strength, they shouldn't have the ability to do so." The Fergus family indeed doesn't have the ability, but don't forget that the Fergus family is now riding on someone's coattails. Count Smalley snorted coldly and said mockingly, "The Ford family." Winston Smalley's eyes narrowed, immediately understanding the reason behind Count Smalley's words. The Fergus family indeed didn't have the strength to destroy the Valentine family, but the Ford family did. If the Ford family was willing to help the Fergus family, they indeed had the ability to destroy the Valentine family. Damn it, the Fergus family actually dared to do this. Winston Smalley clenched his fists and looked at Count Smalley. "Father, we can't just let this go." "I know." Count Smalley's face was cold. The Smalley family had no choice but to accept the matter of Grey Fergus causing a ruckus in Smalley City because of the conclusive evidence. After all, this batch of medicinal herbs was related to the Sidney family. To a certain extent, it had great implications, so they didn't send people to detain Grey Fergus in the end. But now that the Fergus family had actually destroyed the Smalley family, if the Smalley family didn't do anything, they would probably become a joke in the noble circle. "Summon the two Viscounts and follow me to the Fergus family." In the Fergus family study, Gray, who had returned to the Fergus family, recounted what he had done in the past few days. "Father, we've destroyed the Valentine family. The Smalley family should suspect the Fergus family. They probably won't let this go," Bernal said with some worry. "That's for sure." Viscount Fergus nodded. With the character of the Smalley family, it was certain that they wouldn't let the matter rest when the nobles they had infected were exterminated. "Then what should we do?" Bernal was worried. "Since they dared to come, the Fergus family will receive them." Viscount Fergus snorted coldly. When Gray asked Viscount Fergus to send Ike and the others over, he had already stated that he would take action against the Valentine family. However, Viscount Fergus didn't stop him. Just as he had said before, no matter if it was bandits or any power, since they dared to attack the Fergus family, they naturally had to pay the price. Otherwise, other families or bandits would think that the Fergus family was weak and would become more aggressive in the future. Just teach the Smalley family a lesson. The Valentine family is a noble family under the Smalley family. The Smalley family is also responsible for what the Valentine family did. Gray snorted coldly. With 4 mad-level blood fiends in his hands, he wasn't afraid of the Smalley family. Now, the 4 blood fiends didn't look much different from real blood fiends. Even if they were exposed, it would at most spread the fact that the Fergus family had mad-level blood fiends. Instead, it would deter other families and attract the attention of the Sidney family. As the supreme ruler of the Sidney Marquisdom, the Sidney family naturally hoped that the nobles under their command would be as strong as possible. Looking at Viscount Fergus and then at Gray, the worry on Bernal's face disappeared. When he first heard that they had offended the Count Smalley family, he was subconsciously worried. After all, the other party was a powerful Count family. However, when he heard the words of Viscount Fergus and Gray, he reacted. The Fergus family now was different from before. With 4 mad-level blood fiends, if the Smalley family really dared to bully them, it was hard to say who would be the one bullying who. A few days later, a special troop entered the territory of Viscount Fergus and headed towards the Fergus castle aggressively, raising a cloud of dust. The whole troop had more than 100 people. Surrounding them were soldiers wearing high-grade leather armor and blood warriors wearing battle armor. Inside the troop was a huge carriage. It was a 2-horse carriage. The carriage was extremely spacious. On both sides of the carriage, there was a conspicuous golden symbol. It was a tightly clenched glove, shining with a resplendent golden light. This was the symbol of the Smalley family. Naturally, the people in the carriage were from the Smalley family. Let's go and welcome them. As the host, we still have to show proper aristocratic etiquette. Viscount Fergus stood up and said to Gray and Bernal after receiving the report from his family spies. Gray and Bernal looked at each other and stood up to follow. In front of the Fergus family's castle, the huge 2-horse carriage stopped. A man with long brown hair and a dignified aura walked down. After that, a young man with brown hair and 2 men who were no longer young walked down in succession. "Count Smalley, please." Viscount Fergus shot a glance at Count Smalley and at the same time glanced at the 2 men behind Count Smalley who were very likely ferocious blood warriors. There was no change in his expression. After making an extremely cold gesture of invitation, he minded his own business and walked forward. Gray and Bernal didn't say anything and followed Viscount Fergus. Chapter 207. In the Fergus family's living room, Gray's group and the 4 from the Smalley family sat on 2 sides. The atmosphere was extremely stifling. The Smalley family didn't come with good intentions, and the Fergus family wasn't someone that could be easily bullied, even if the other party was a Count's family. "Viscount Fergus, don't you think you should give me an explanation?" Count Smalley said with a cold expression. "Count Smalley, what do you mean by this?" Viscount Fergus looked at Count Smalley with a puzzled expression. "Humph, are you still going to play dumb?" Count Smalley snorted in dissatisfaction. "Since you have the guts to exterminate the Valentine family, you should have the courage to admit it." "What? The Fergus family doesn't even have the courage to admit it. Looks like I've overestimated you," Viscount Fergus said with a surprised and puzzled expression. "Although I'm also very regretful that the Valentine family was exterminated, Count Smalley, what do you mean by this? I don't quite understand. You still don't want to admit it?" Count Smalley coldly looked at Viscount Fergus. There's no need to deny it. A few days ago, your Fergus family exterminated a pharmacy of the Valentine family. A few days later, the Valentine family was exterminated. Don't tell me that it's just a coincidence. That pharmacy belonged to the Valentine family? Count Smalley, is this true? Viscount Fergus didn't seem to panic when facing Count Smalley's questioning gaze. Instead, he was filled with surprise. My Fergus family did exterminate a pharmacy a while ago. However, the reason why we exterminated that pharmacy was because that pharmacy was opened by the robbers who plundered the Fergus family's medicinal ingredients. Count Smalley, can you explain the relationship between the Valentine family and the robbers? My Fergus family would like to ask the Smalley family for an explanation on this matter. What a joke! You actually dare to ask my Smalley family for an explanation. Vincent Smalley laughed in disdain. Do you really think that my Smalley family won't dare to do anything to you just because you have the backing of the Ford family? What? Only your Smalley family is allowed to demand an explanation from my Fergus family, but my Fergus family is not allowed to demand an explanation from your Smalley family? Gray let out a cold snort and stared coldly at Winston Smalley. Young Master Winston Smalley isn't strong enough, but you sure talk big. Those who don't know might think that you've already inherited the title. Ew. Hearing Gray's words, Winston Smalley recalled how he had been defeated by Gray earlier, and his countenance instantly turned grim. Gray Fergus, don't think that you've got me just because you've taken advantage of me. If we were to fight seriously, it's hard to say who would win. Since young Master Vincent Smalley is so confident, why don't we have a match? Gray had a provocative look as he looked at Winston Smalley. Bring it on. Winston Smalley was about to accept the challenge in anger, but he was stopped by Count Smalley. He threw a cold glance at Gray before looking at Viscount Fergus. I don't care what grudges your Fergus family has with the Valentine family. Since the Valentine family has been wiped out, your Fergus family must give an explanation. Count Smalley is really domineering as usual. Viscount Fergus's countenance turned cold. Putting aside the fact that the Valentine family is related to the robbers, it's only right for my Fergus family to wipe them out. Even if you say that the Valentine family was wiped out by our Fergus family, that's merely your inference. Do you have any proof? Proof? My Smalley family doesn't need that kind of thing. Count Smalley had a faint sneer on his face. Since I've determined that it was done by your Fergus family, then it's done by your Fergus family. How domineering. Young Master Vincent Smalley is already domineering enough. I didn't expect there to be someone even more domineering than him. As expected of father and son. Gray had a sneer on his face. Oomph. Hearing Gray's sneer, Count Smalley looked at Gray with a cold gaze that seemed to be able to freeze people. Since when is it a child's turn to interrupt when adults are talking? Seems like the Fergus family's upbringing isn't that great. Viscount Fergus, please strengthen your upbringing. Otherwise, you'll only embarrass the nobles of Sydney. You don't have to worry about that. Viscount Fergus snorted coldly. In terms of upbringing, your Smalley family isn't that great either. Saying this, Viscount Fergus threw a mocking glance at Winston Smalley. This was the one who had interjected first. All right, let's cut the crap. Viscount Fergus, give me your explanation. Count Smalley interrupted impatiently and looked at Viscount Fergus with an extremely oppressive gaze. Explanation? Sorry, my Fergus family has nothing to explain to you. Viscount Fergus looked at him with a sneer. Crack! Count Smalley threatened in a cold voice as the armrest of the wooden chair was crushed. Bits of wood that had been crushed into powder leaked out from his fingertips. Believe it or not, even if I severely injure you, Marquis, Sydney won't do anything to me. I believe it. Viscount Fergus nodded. What he said was the truth. The Smalley family was one of the two major families, second only to the Sydney family. They were the Sydney family's left and right arms. The Sydney family was extremely tolerant of the Smalley family. As long as they didn't go too far, the Sydney family would usually turn a blind eye. After all, a Count family like the Smalley family was the true backbone of the Sydney family. Others, even a few Viscount families, were far less useful on the battlefield than a Count family like the Smalley family. But you don't have that ability. Then Viscount Fergus suddenly raised his head and said confidently, You still don't understand the situation? Did the Ford family give you this confidence? Count Smalley looked at Viscount Fergus with disdain. Capture him, as long as he doesn't die. As soon as his voice fell, the two rather older men who had been listening in on the conversation all this time suddenly stood up, quickly throwing themselves at Viscount Fergus. One of them held a battle-axe, while the other held a strange-looking scimitar. Bang, bang. The space in the living room was naturally not very big. After a few steps, the battle-axe-wielding man and machete-wielding man had already closed in on Viscount Fergus. The huge battle-axe blade was bright white. From top to bottom, it was like a waterfall falling from the sky as it slashed towards Viscount Fergus. The purple machete was like a crescent moon, extremely cold as it slashed towards Viscount Fergus from the left. From the speed and movement of the weapons displayed by the two men, the two were ferocious blood warriors. Viscount Fergus drew his sword in the face of the two ferocious blood warriors' siege, but he was only able to block the attack from one direction. In the end, he chose the battle-axe that came from the front. Seeing Viscount Fergus swing his sword to block the battle-axe, the man holding the machete revealed a cold smile. The machete in his hand slashed towards Viscount Fergus' waist. However, at this moment, he suddenly felt a cold light flash from the side. A bone-chilling feeling suddenly came over him. The machete that he slashed out was subconsciously reversed and slashed behind him. Clang! With a loud sound, he only felt a huge force coming from the machete. His body was involuntarily shaken and retreated continuously. As he retreated, he looked in the direction of the attack. Then, he clearly saw what was attacking him. It was a blue and white sword, and the owner of the sword was surprisingly an excessively young man. He was actually forced to retreat by a young man. This was illogical. Could it be that the other party was already? Swish! At this moment, the blue sword followed him like a shadow. The sword was as fast as lightning, slashing towards him. Clang! He swung his machete to block and blocked it, but the same heavy feeling came over him again. Moreover, the blue sword light attacked again. Clang, clang, clang. He blocked continuously, and his expression became more and more solemn. The person in front of him was definitely a ferocious blood warrior of the same realm as him. Moreover, he was very strong and gave him an extremely strong sense of oppression. It was getting harder and harder for him to block. Pooh! Unable to block in time, the blue and white sword suddenly slid across his chest. Blood immediately flowed from his chest, dyeing half of his clothes red. How is this possible? Winston Smalley looked in astonishment at Gray, who was exchanging blows with the man holding the machete. To think that this guy had blocked a ferocious blood warrior. Moreover, he had even injured this ferocious blood warrior. Didn't this mean that Fong Xingjian was a genuine ferocious blood warrior? However, how was this possible? Although he knew that Gray Fergus's talent was extremely high, he still found it hard to believe that he had become a ferocious blood warrior at such a young age. It wasn't just him. Right now, even Count Smalley found it hard to maintain his composure. His countenance kept changing, just like how Gray changed his face in the Sichuan opera in his previous life. One could very well imagine how unsettled he was right now. To think that he has become a ferocious blood warrior at such a young age. Count Smalley clenched his fists tightly, and a hint of wariness appeared in his heart. Although Fong Xingjian was still a ferocious blood warrior, given his rate of growth, it probably wouldn't be long before Fong Xingjian caught up to him. In the future, Fong Xingjian might even surpass him. I can't let him live. A hint of viciousness flashed in his eyes. Since Fong Xingjian was already an enemy of the Smalley clan, then he couldn't allow Fong Xingjian to continue growing. Even if he had to risk being severely punished by the Sydney family, he had to cripple Fong Xingjian. Otherwise, Fong Xingjian would definitely become a great threat to the Smalley clan in the future. Swoosh! At the thought of this, he stood up, put on his boxing gloves, and activated the mechanism on them. Sharp blades instantly slid out from the gloves. He stomped on the ground and pounced out, grabbing out toward Gray. The many sharp blades gleamed with cold light and were extremely sharp. If he were to grab them, he'd definitely be able to break Gray's arm. This was exactly what he wanted. A crippled genius wasn't a genius. As long as he could cripple Gray Fergus, no matter how dissatisfied the Sidney family was, they definitely wouldn't make things too difficult for the Smalley clan. Chapter 208. Whoosh! Count Smalley quickly pounced on Gray. Just as he was about to pounce on Gray, he suddenly felt his hair stand on end. His battle instincts, which had been honed over the years, allowed him to instinctively sense danger. Reflexively, he hurriedly retreated. Rip! A yellow figure flashed past, and the sound of cloth being torn could be heard. Clear scratches appeared on Count Smalley's noble attire. The skin around the scratches could be clearly seen. Traces of blood flowed out from the scratches, making it extremely eye-catching. Count Smalley, who had the strength of a berserker, was injured, although it was only a superficial wound. An injury was an indisputable fact. Father. The sudden turn of events caused Vincent Smalley to cry out in alarm. He looked at the claw marks on his father's chest in shock. His father, who had the strength of a berserker, was actually injured? How was this possible? How could the Fergus family have the means to injure his father? At this very moment, the shock he felt was even greater than when he found out that Gray was already a ferocious warrior. Being able to become a ferocious warrior at such a young age meant that Gray had great potential in the future. However, potential was still potential. Although he was apprehensive, it was not enough to threaten the Smalley family. However, being able to injure his father, who had the strength of a berserker, was different. This meant that the Fergus family already had the strength or means to threaten the Smalley family. Bang! After kicking away the man with the scimitar, Gray looked at Count Smalley with a mocking gaze. Beside him, a leopard-type blood fiend with a body length of 3 meters, excluding its tail, appeared. If Count Smalley wants to play, I can let it serve you. How could Gray not be on guard against a berserker? He had already ordered the leopard blood fiend to hide outside. Once the other party made a move, the leopard blood fiend would immediately move out. Berserker blood fiend, Windrider leopard. Looking at the leopard blood fiend standing beside Gray, Count Smalley's pupils contracted. The Fergus family actually had a berserker blood fiend? Although he was unwilling to believe it, it was the truth. Only a berserker blood fiend could injure him with such speed. It was impossible for a berserker blood fiend to be able to injure him. At the same time, he felt a burst of jealousy in his heart. Even the Smalley family couldn't afford to have a mad-level blood fiend. Yet the Fergus family, a mere Viscount family, actually had one. Jealousy, extreme jealousy. What? This leopard is a mad-level blood fiend? Winston Smalley's face was filled with astonishment as he looked at his father in astonishment. However, after seeing the injury on his father's chest, he believed it. Other than a berserk-level blood fiend, how could an ordinary murderous-level blood fiend injure his father, who was already a berserk-level blood fiend? The Fergus family actually has a mad-level blood fiend. The battle-axe-wielding man and the scimitar-wielding man crawled up from the ground and met up with Count Smalley. Their faces were filled with dread. He had originally thought that with Count Smalley's strength and the two of them, it would be easy to deal with the Fergus family, which was only a Viscount family. However, the Fergus family had surprised them twice in a row. First, an extremely young, ferocious blood warrior disciple appeared. Now, a berserk blood fiend with strength comparable to a berserker had appeared. Wasn't the background of the Fergus family too strong? Was the other party really a Viscount family like them? Viscount Fergus, I've really underestimated you. After a long while, Count Smalley withdrew his gaze from the leopard blood fiend and coldly stared at Viscount Fergus as he spoke. Viscount Fergus raised his head with a calm expression on his face and a carefree feeling in his heart. Is that so? That's truly an honor. However, do you think that you can contend against me with just a berserk-level blood fiend? Count Smalley snorted coldly as a bone-chilling aura suddenly emanated from his body. It's indeed a little difficult. Viscount Fergus nodded his head in affirmation. He still agreed with Count Smalley's words. As the head of such a large Count family, Count Smalley probably had a lot of good stuff on him. For example, a magic potion that could temporarily increase one's strength, a high-quality magic weapon. If Count Smalley used these, the leopard blood fiend might not be his match. Count Smalley was only able to injure Count Smalley previously because he didn't know that the Fergus family had a berserk-level blood fiend. He was caught off guard and was injured. However, Viscount Fergus's words suddenly paused. What if there are two? Two? What a joke. How can your Fergus family afford two berserk-level blood fiends? Vincent Smalley's face was full of contempt. Given the background of the Fergus family, it was already extremely unimaginable for them to afford one berserk-level blood fiend. Having two was absolutely impossible. Did they really think that it was easy to obtain a berserk-level blood fiend? If it was so easy to obtain one, the Smalley family wouldn't be without a berserk-level blood fiend until now. The Fergus family was too naive to think that they could use the news of a second berserk-level blood fiend to frighten them and scare the Smalley family away. Thump, thump, thump. At this moment, a series of muffled footsteps could be heard. It was as if a huge monster was moving towards them. Could there really be a second berserk-level blood fiend? Hearing this, Vincent Smalley's face suddenly stiffened. His heart thumped rapidly as a bad premonition arose in his heart. The footsteps were getting closer and closer. He looked towards the direction of the door and waited anxiously. Finally, the footsteps approached. The first thing that came into view was a huge bullhorn that was as sharp as a scimitar. It was black in color and shiny with oil. Then, there was a huge bull head. Next, there was a bull leg that was as thick as a water bucket. Finally, there was an extremely tall and sturdy torso. Finally, a huge bull-shaped blood fiend entered the living room. It was 4 meters long, and its wide body was like a thick wall. Luckily, the living room had 2 doors. Otherwise, it would be impossible to enter. The black skin on his body seemed to be made of black metal. A second berserk-level blood fiend. Vincent Smalley stared blankly at the bull-shaped blood fiend in front of him. It was impossible for a berserk-level blood fiend to possess such a huge body. There was no doubt that it was a berserk-level blood fiend. Although he did not want to believe it, it was a fact. The Fergus family really had a second berserk-level blood fiend. A strong sense of fear arose in his heart. Even his father would not be able to handle 2 berserk-level blood fiends easily. He turned his head to look at his father. Although his father looked calm, he could clearly sense a trace of unconcealable fear under his calmness. Obviously, even his father did not have the confidence to face 2 berserk-level blood fiends of the same level. He might not even have much of a chance of winning. The Fergus family. Good, very good, Count Smalley said. He tried his best to keep his voice calm, but one could clearly feel the fear under his calmness. He was truly fearful now. If there was only 1 berserk-level blood fiend, he still had the confidence to win. But if there were 2, he definitely had no chance of winning. Let's go. Count Smalley walked far away from the bull-shaped blood fiends and strode out of the living room. Vincent Smalley and the other 2 men hurriedly followed without any hesitation. They were afraid that they would be left behind if they were too late. As for the explanation, it was obvious that it was impossible. Although they were furious, they had to admit that the Fergus family was not afraid of the Smalley family at all. They definitely would not give the Smalley family an explanation. Soon, more than 100 men from the Smalley family left Fergus Castle with their tails between their legs. They came with their heads held high and left like a prodigal dog. This was the most realistic portrayal of the Smalley family at this moment. The Smalley family. In front of Fergus Castle's gate, Bernal looked with contempt at the Smalley family's men who were leaving as if they were fleeing. His heart was filled with pride. Among the Viscount families, there was probably only the Fergus family that could force the Count family, the Smalley family, to leave after coming here aggressively to denounce them. I wonder how they will react when they find out that the Fergus family has a 3rd or even a 4th berserk-level blood fiend. Bernal looked at Gray with a regretful expression. It's a pity that you didn't summon the other 2 blood fiends, Gray. Just 2 berserk-level blood fiends were enough to scare the Smalley family into leaving with their tails between their legs. If the Smalley family knew that the Fergus family had 2 more berserk-level blood fiends, their reaction would definitely be spectacular. There's no need. 2 berserk-level blood fiends are enough to scare them off. There's no need to expose more trump cards. Gray shook his head. With the Windrider leopard's undiminished strength and the bull-shaped blood fiend that couldn't use its blood fiend abilities, it was enough to contend with or even defeat Count Smalley. There was no need to summon the other two blood fiends. After all, their goal was only to force Count Smalley to retreat, not to kill him. If they really did that, the Sidney family definitely wouldn't let the Fergus family off. Even if the Fergus family wasn't exterminated, they would definitely be severely punished. After all, this matter had seriously damaged the Sidney family's interests. In order to kill Count Smalley, the Fergus family would fall into a disadvantageous situation. For the Fergus family that was fighting for the title of Count, it was obviously not worth it. Indeed, it's enough. Viscount Fergus nodded in agreement. Chapter 209. Outside, there were layers of guards. Inside the carriage, Vincent Smalley could not help but feel a chill. "Father, will the Fergus family attack us on the way back?" He looked at Count Smalley with unease. At this moment, he was no longer as arrogant as before. His heart was filled with worry. Two mad level blood fiends. The Fergus family actually had two mad level blood fiends. If these two mad level blood fiends were to intercept them on the way back, even his father, who had the strength of a mad warrior, might not be able to escape. After all, one of the two mad level blood fiends was the Windrider leopard, which excelled in speed. As for himself, it would be even more difficult for him to escape. No, many families must already know that we are heading towards the Fergus family. If we were to be attacked on the way back, anyone with a discerning eye would be able to guess that the Fergus family was involved. The Fergus family would definitely not dare to do this. Count Smalley shook his head and then frowned. But after this, we have to be careful. The Fergus family actually had two mad level blood fiends. If he had known, he would definitely not have rashly gone to their house to denounce them. Now that he had offended the Fergus family, he could not help but worry that the Fergus family would not retaliate against the Sidney family in the future. Even he did not have the confidence to contend against two mad level blood fiends. "Father, what should we do?" Vincent Smalley was anxious. After we returned, immediately spread the news of today's incident. Count Smalley rolled his eyes as he said this. Won't the other noble families see our Smalley family as a joke? Winston Smalley was stunned for a moment, but he quickly reacted. "Father, are you planning to publicize the fact that the Fergus family has two mad level blood fiends, and that the Fergus family and the Smalley family have become enemies? In this way, if something happens to the Smalley family, the other noble families will definitely link it to the Fergus family." "Yes." Count Smalley nodded. Although the Smalley family would lose face by publicizing today's incident, it would also prevent the Fergus family from easily acting against them. Between losing face and protecting the clan, it was obviously more important to protect the clan. A few days later, under the deliberate dissemination of the Smalley family, the news quickly spread. The Fergus family exterminated the Smalley family and infected them as nobles. The Smalley family came to question them, but were forced to retreat by the Fergus family. Grey Fergus's strength has already reached the level of a ferocious blood warrior, and the Fergus family has two berserk blood fiends. The first reaction of the aristocratic families who received the news was disbelief. The Fergus family was only a Viscount family. How could they possibly gain an advantage over the Smalley family? How old was Grey Fergus? He was only 19 years old. How could he be a ferocious blood warrior? It was even more impossible for the Fergus family to have two mad level blood fiends. A berserk level blood fiend was comparable to a berserk warrior. How could the Fergus family possibly get their hands on one? Even the Smalley family and the Ford family did not have a berserk level blood fiend. The Fergus family was only a Viscount family. How could they possibly have the ability to get their hands on a berserk level blood fiend? However, when the news spread for a few days and the Smalley family did not come forward to refute it, the aristocratic families believed it. It was impossible for the Smalley family to let news that was unfavorable to them continue to spread without stopping it. In other words, the Smalley family had tacitly acknowledged the authenticity of the news. For a moment, the aristocratic families were filled with shock. The Fergus family had concealed their strength too deeply. They actually had two berserk-level blood fiends. Furthermore, Grey Fergus was a genius of the Fergus family. His talent was too terrifying. He was only 19 years old, but he was already a ferocious blood warrior. How far would it be for him to become a berserk warrior? If they were only slightly optimistic about the Fergus family during the battle for the position of Count before this, they were absolutely optimistic now. The two berserk-level blood fiends represented that the Fergus family had a strong foundation. For a genius descendant to become a ferocious blood warrior at such a young age, it meant that the Fergus family had great potential. Whether it was in terms of foundation or potential, the Fergus family was enough to throw the other Viscount families by a large margin. Under such circumstances, the Fergus family's final victory in the battle for the position of Count was almost inevitable. In fact, it was not only the aristocratic families. Even the Sidney family, the supreme ruler of the entire Sidney territory, could not help but be shocked by this news. The Fergus family actually has a berserk-level blood fiend, and there are actually two of them. In the study of Sidney Castle, Zaloyan frowned. After so many days, neither the Smalley family nor the Fergus family had come forward to refute the rumors. This meant that the news was credible. However, he felt that it was full of abnormalities. Were berserk-level blood fiends so easy to obtain? When blood fiends gave birth, they would usually be extremely cautious and hide. Therefore, even if one had the ability to kill a berserk-level blood fiend, without the corresponding luck, one would not be able to obtain a berserk-level blood fiend's offspring. For example, the Smalley family and the Ford family had been Count families for so many years, but because they did not have the corresponding luck, they had not been able to obtain a berserk-level blood fiend. And the Fergus family was only a Viscount family. How could they have the ability to hunt a berserk-level blood fiend? Moreover, they were extremely lucky to obtain two berserk-level blood fiends. Father, I feel that the Fergus family has a secret. After thinking for a moment, he looked at Marquis Sidney and said, Marquis Sidney had a head of golden hair. Although he was over 50 years old, he did not look too old because of his powerful strength. A Viscount family actually has two berserk-level blood fiends. The Fergus family definitely has a secret. Hearing Zaloyan's words, he said with certainty, but then he changed the topic of discussion. But so what? Zaloyan narrowed his eyes and asked, Father, what do you mean? Which family doesn't have a secret? Looking at Zaloyan, Marquis Sidney's eyes were deep and profound. Don't worry about what secrets the Fergus family has. You only need to know whether the Fergus family can be used by you. This is the mentality that a superior should have. Speaking of this, Marquis Sidney paused slightly. After some time, you will attend a Fergus family's wedding on behalf of the Sidney family. Use your eyes to judge whether the Fergus family can be used by you. Very quickly, a month had passed. In the Fergus family's training room that had been converted from a warehouse, a 3-meter-long wolf-type blood fiend with green fur all over its body roared at the sky, emitting a powerful and dignified aura. Whoosh! Suddenly, the green-furred wolf-type blood fiend collapsed. Green light scattered like dandelion fluff, diffusing and disappearing in all directions. In the green light, a person's figure appeared. It was gray. He was sweating profusely, as if he had been in a sauna. Panting heavily, he stood up, walked to a stand against the wall, took a towel, and wiped the sweat off his body. I've reached a bottleneck. Since a few days ago, his strength had stopped growing, and he was stuck at the point where he was just one step away from breaking through and becoming a berserker. Obviously, he had touched the bottleneck between a ferocious warrior and a berserker, and was at the critical point between the two realms. Once he broke through, he would immediately become a berserker. As long as he didn't break through, he would remain a ferocious warrior. If only I had a few bottles of concentrated potion. Concentrated potion, the essence of concentrated potion, had the effect of rapidly increasing one's strength. However, this method was too extravagant. The best way was to use it when breaking through a bottleneck. For example, if Gray had a few bottles of concentrated potion, he would be able to break through his current bottleneck in a few days at most. Unfortunately, such things couldn't be bought with money. Occasionally, they would appear in an auction house and immediately be snatched up. As for the legendary magic potion shops that sold magic potions, such places didn't exist. At least, Gray hadn't heard of any place that had them. Indeed, the magic potions in the hands of potion masters were never lacking in buyers. There was simply no need to set up a shop to sell them. I can only slowly endure it. Without concentrated potions, he could only break through the bottleneck through time and the method of dripping water-penetrating stone. Fortunately, he was in the middle of the second metamorphosis. Even if he broke through a bottleneck, the amount of time he needed was many times less than ordinary people. Otherwise, if he were to be like some people who were stuck at a bottleneck for months or even years, it would simply be a kind of torture. He left the training room, took a bath, and went to the hall. One servant after another was busy walking back and forth. The hall was decorated with a brand new look. The originally dull, dark yellow color had been replaced with a bright yellow color. Apart from that, more and more gorgeous potted plants had been added, filling the entire hall with the fragrance of plants. In a few days, it would be Bernal and Bernice Evelyn's wedding day. It could be said that Fergus Castle was at its busiest at this time. However, it would always be the servants who were busy. As the class that enjoyed life, they would at most move their mouths. In the garden, he found Sarah and the others sunbathing. He also saw Bernal, who looked a little nervous because the wedding day was approaching. Chapter 2:10. A few days later, in a newly decorated banquet hall of Fergus Castle, a grand wedding banquet was being held. Many nobles who were on good terms with the two families, or nobles who had been infected by the Fergus Castle. Even the Sidney family had sent Zeloyan and Polly to represent the Sidney family. Of course, other than attending the wedding banquet, they had other motives. As for the Ford family, which was interested in being on good terms with the Fergus family, they were personally led by Earl Ford. They were the highest-ranking nobles present. Before the conflict between the Fergus family and the Smalley family, the Fergus family could still be described as a family with the potential to become an earl. However, after the conflict between the Fergus family and the Smalley family, the Fergus family could no longer be described as a family with the potential to become an earl. Two mad-class blood fiends. With these two mad-class blood fiends, the Fergus family was already an earl family, even though they were not yet an earl family. They were completely capable of opposing the Ford family and the Smalley family, and even made the two families feel threatened. The Ford family naturally had to spare no effort to be on good terms with such a family. Fortunately, the Ford family and the Fergus family had been on good terms recently. The Smalley family was the one with a headache. After offending such a strong enemy, they did not know if they could still sleep well. Bernal and Bernice Evelyn's, the newlyweds, stood in the center of the banquet hall and became the focus of everyone's attention and blessings. The Fergus family, on the other hand, was busy. Even Gray was forced to shuttle back and forth in the banquet hall to liven up the atmosphere. Many noble ladies approached him, causing his face to stiffen from smiling. Fortunately, the main characters today were Bernal and Bernice Evelyn's, as well as Zeloyan and Polly, two important figures from the Sidney family, and a heavyweight like Earl Ford. Only then did the pressure lessen. From yesterday to today, he had not been idle at all. Yesterday morning, he had gone to the Evelyn's family to welcome the bride. Today, after returning to the Fergus family, he was busy greeting the nobles who had come to attend the wedding. He felt more tired than training. He found a remote table and sat down, preparing to slack off. "Why? Are you tired?" Behind him, a voice suddenly rang out. He turned around and saw a beautiful blonde woman in a light blue dress walking over. Seeing the visitor, Gray didn't have the intention to get up and greet him. Instead, he let out a sigh of relief and continued to sit at the table. "I'm so tired that I don't want to move. I feel more tired than people who are getting married." "Poochie." The woman chuckled and sat down at the table. She rolled her eyes and said, "Don't worry. Is it that exaggerated? You'll know when your elder brother gets married." Gray shrugged. Polly Sidney was one of the two representatives sent by the Sidney family to attend the wedding. He had stayed with the Fergus family for more than half a month because he had accompanied Master Tulu. Gray was quite familiar with him, so he didn't bother to greet him. Of course, the most important thing was that he was too tired to move. "Then it will be hard to wait. My big brother has very high standards." Polly glanced at Zero, who was surrounded by many noble ladies. Like Bernal, Zero was also of marriageable age. Although he had interacted with noble ladies of similar status, Zero didn't seem to have met anyone he liked. I can see that. Gray nodded. He was surrounded by many noble ladies, many of whom were rather beautiful. Although Zero had a smile on his face, he did not show much enthusiasm. It was obvious that the next successor of the Sidney family had very high standards. As if sensing Gray's gaze, the woman looked over and apologized to the surrounding noble ladies. She then took the opportunity to slip away and walk over with a glass of red wine. Young Master Zero. Seeing the woman walk over, Gray picked up a glass of red wine, stood up, and clinked glasses with her. As an adult, he could naturally drink. Gray, you really gave me a shock. You actually became a ferocious warrior so quickly. My status as the #1 genius of the Sydney territory is going to be snatched away by you. Looking at Gray, Zero joked. Young Master Zero, you must be joking. Gray replied with a wry smile. I'm not joking. After chatting for a while, Zero jokingly said in a relaxed tone, I heard that the Fergus family has 2 berserk blood fiends. When will you take me to see them? Gray's eyes flickered slightly. If young Master Zero is interested, we can do it now. I want to see them too. Soon, Gray led Zero and Polly out of the banquet hall and toward the castle's basement. 3. There are actually 3 of them? Arriving at the basement, Zero and Polly couldn't help but be surprised by the light of the rune lamps. There were actually 3 gigantic blood fiends in the basement. Didn't that mean that the Fergus family had 3 berserk blood fiends? The Fergus family actually has 3 berserk blood fiends? After being stunned for a moment, Zero and Polly came back to their senses and looked at Gray in surprise. Go closer and touch their bodies. Gray didn't immediately answer their questions. Instead, he gave them a hint. Confusion flashed across their faces, but they still approached one of the blood fiends and stretched out their hands to touch its body. They weren't afraid that the berserk blood fiends would suddenly go berserk. As members of the Marquis family, they naturally had some means to protect themselves. Although they couldn't contend against the berserk blood fiends, they had no problem protecting themselves for a short period of time. So cold, Polly hurriedly withdrew her hand and looked at the blood fiend in front of her with a stupefied expression. The blood fiend in front of her didn't have any body temperature. Its entire body was ice cold. Zero squinted his eyes and approached the head of the blood fiend, carefully examining its eyes. A moment later, he raised his head and said in astonishment, Dead? Yes, they're all dead. In fact, they're all corpses of blood fiends that I obtained from a ruin some time ago. They were controlled by a magical weapon. There are a total of 4 corpses of such blood fiends. The last one is placed outside the castle. Gray nodded his head and explained. After learning that the Sidney family would send Zero to attend the wedding, Gray and Viscount Fergus guessed that Zero's visit this time wasn't just for the wedding. It was likely that he was here to test the Fergus family's attitude towards the Sidney family. After some discussion, the two finally decided to inform the Sidney family of the fact that the berserk blood fiend was controlled by a magical weapon. The other 2 berserk blood fiends would be exposed sooner or later. No matter how one looked at it, it was abnormal for a Viscount family to have 4 berserk blood fiends. It was better to explain it clearly once and for all. This way, they could gain the favor of the Sidney family. If the Fergus family wanted to become a Count family, they had to have enough berserk warriors and enough military achievements. These were the most basic conditions. The most important was to gain the trust of the Sidney family. If they couldn't gain the trust of the Sidney family, why would they hand over such a large territory to the Fergus family? So that's how it is. After hearing Gray's explanation, Polly opened her mouth in shock. Zero's face revealed a look of understanding. His previous suspicions had been confirmed. The only thing he didn't expect was that the Fergus family would reveal such an important secret. This made him view the Fergus family in a new light. For berserk blood fiends, doesn't that mean 4 berserk warriors? Polly exclaimed. Of course not. After all, they're the corpses of blood fiends. In terms of strength, they can't be compared to living blood fiends. Moreover, they can't use their abilities. Gray shook his head. Gray, can you increase the number of blood fiends you can control? Zero's eyebrows twitched. This is already the limit. The number and level have already reached the limit. I can control a total of 20 Berserk Blood Fiends and 4 Berserk Blood Fiends at most. Gray shook his head. As expected, Zero was not surprised by Gray's answer. Regardless of whether it was the magic weapon or the abilities of the Blood Fiends, there was a limit. A limit of 4 Berserk Blood Fiends was already a rather powerful magic weapon. In the end, Zero and Polly left the basement in shock. They didn't request to control the magic weapon or the like. This was because in their hearts, they knew very well that this was beyond the Fergus family's bottom line. No family would hand over their ultimate trump card to another family, even if the other party was an upper-class aristocrat. The Infeft aristocrats were only subordinates of the upper-class aristocrats, not slaves. The relationship between the two was one of mutual benefit. Even the upper-class aristocrats couldn't plunder the wealth of the Infeft aristocrats. By revealing the existence of a magic weapon, the Fergus family had already expressed their goodwill as an aristocrat. If they still asked for the magic weapon to be handed over, it would only cause dissatisfaction and resistance from the Infeft aristocrats. In fact, this was exactly the case. If they had asked to see the magic weapon, Gray would have directly refused. Not being able to take it out was one thing. Even if he could, he would definitely not take it out. This was the bottom line of a family. If they were really pushed to the brink, they could just give up their territory and leave the Sydney family. With power, why would they be afraid of not being able to survive?